White Lincoln X-ray 985 should come back up next.
So you had 2000 Patrick Salting.
10-4. If you can just put a note in something like that, I'm going to be leaving a note on his vehicle so I can remove it.
Rockingham 505. 505 enters vandalism case for Athens, complainant, soon to be ex, slasher tires and has made threatening comments to her. She's concerned he might return.
Yeah, forgive this at 32.
10-4. 532, you're assigned to a vandalism case in Athens. Did you copy the 505?
Yeah, 4.
445.
Look at that.
21.
No, 3 in Depot Street. Truck boy entering 5.
7435.
10-4.
10-4.
You can go 643 again.
143.
You go with that 43 you had. I didn't hear any, but it just looks like we do.
10-4, I just wanted to know if you should be put back 76 to Cabana Circle or to the subject's address.
Yeah, I'll be 23 back on that town property case, and I'll be 76 to the Williams Road address to see if I can find the owner.
10-4. 449, 1120.
449, 1121, thank you.
10-4.
Code 4. 4.
Rockingham 535.
That's a great college.
535.
Should be. You guys know it for a woman who walked into a house. I'll slide up that way.
Caller is now been able to close the front door. He's now pounding on the door, trying to get it down. He's not fine to go out long dark hair. He's got a tie-dye shirt on. Number 21
We have separation. Inboard now. She's ready.
Hey guys, good to see everybody. It's been a few days off. Good to be back. Good to see familiar names in chat. We're going to jump right into things here. Let me just remove this opening. All right, guys. A lot to get into today. So there's been some big news in the Delphi murders. This is the trial of Richard Allen coming up in October. And this really is, I know it's hard to believe it for people around here and maybe even globally, much bigger case in terms of attention and interest than Karen Reed. Yes, that's true. The Delphi murders are huge, huge global interest. Now that the conspiracy has died down a little bit with the arrest of Richard Allen, it's maybe not as interesting to people as it was, say, a couple of years ago. But it's kicked up again because the defense theory has put out almost a year ago, last September, their theory that their client is factually innocent. Where have we heard that before? And that the real killers were an Odinist cult. But there's some really news that is really big in this case that came out on several pretrial hearings this week. So we're going to get into that. We will go over Karen Reed stuff. We do have a big hearing coming on the 9th. So I think that's this coming Friday. That's a big deal. Let me just check and make sure my volume is good. Not in chat. Usually someone's telling me if I'm screwing it up or if the mic's not working. Don't see any complaints. That's good. So, all right. So in addition, we're going to go over some more on the Ellen Greenberg. This is still a current case, and there's even going to be more interest in it if presidential nominee Harrisburg chooses Governor Shapiro from Pennsylvania, because he was the attorney general at the time of this. Now, I don't have any reason myself to believe that there was any wrongdoing on his part, but a lot of people who believe in the conspiracy here might feel otherwise. And I have not had time to dig too deeply into the documents. I did get a little bit more information today. So I don't want to have a powerful opinion one way or the other. I'm a little bit skeptical of the conspiracy, but at the same time, I'm open to it. And people that I respect do believe in it. So that's all the more reason to remain open to the different possibilities here. And there is some intriguing evidence in it. The other thing is that case is, I think, important for us, as we're going to see with the Delphi case coming up, is these things come up over and over in a lot of cases. But a lot of times, if there's only one case that you got really interested in true crime and did a deep dive looking into, then you may not realize that a lot of this stuff comes up in certainly a lot of high profile cases, maybe most high profile cases, anywhere where any case where, certainly if the defense has enough resources to dig deeply into things. But in the case of Richard Allen, his lawyers are public defendants, and they still managed to come up with this. They dug deep, they came up with this Odinist theory, and they found a lot of material to support it, at least to make a case to a lot of people. Sunshine says, you didn't need to explain your health. Well, thank you. I appreciate the support. And I don't do it looking for sympathy. I just want to explain, because a lot of people question me on it, is that one of the things is when people smear you in social media, and social media smears have been around ever since there's social media. But this particular group, the Pink Army, the Turtle Boy Army, is more focused and organized on doing that, because these are Turtle Boy tactics that he's developed long before the Karen Reed case. And so it's just kind of what they do. And it does a lot of damage. You can't just ignore it. On the one hand, you can ignore it and say, what can you do about social media smears? Because you can't do anything, right? But on the other hand, what I was finding is that even people that are on my side start questioning it and saying, no, is there possibly any truth to it? And then you start to damage people on your side too, because they say, well, maybe we can't really talk to Kevin because here's this guy who's faking cancer, or who is making money off cancer, which isn't true either. Or I'm not even going to go into the worst claims that they say. If you think about the worst claim that you could try to smear any male with, they do it. You know what that is. I'm not going to give it a name, but there is literally nothing in my past that could be the basis of any kind of smear, let alone that kind of smear. Nothing. Not a single complaint, not a charge, nothing. I mean, nothing even close. Nothing even ballpark. So, but it's just what they do. And unfortunately, if you do it enough, and when you have such a large organized social media army that they have, eventually some of it starts to stick, and it's just unfair. They can't beat you with an argument. So that's what they have. And it's effective, because I know for a fact that there are a lot of lawyers that are afraid to get involved in these cases for this reason. They won't get involved in the prosecution of Karen Reed. They won't get involved in the prosecution of Aidan Kearney. It's because they're afraid of either themselves being smeared, falsely smeared. That's the thing, is, well, the things that people are afraid of are lies. They're not afraid of, sure, a lot of people might have that thing that's a little bit embarrassing in their past, right? But it's worse than that. They're afraid that they're going to take stuff and just make it up and run with it. And this crowd, there's a guy, David Alexander, he's constantly spreading these falsehoods about me. It's cowardly. It's cowardly. Now, here's a guy who I think fought for his country, so I appreciate that. But that doesn't mean you're not still a coward. You're out there spreading falsehoods because either you're a little insane, or because you're so determined to win this argument or to prove your loyalty to a crowd that, I mean, the Turtle Boy crowd has to be among the more disreputable in all of social media. It's hard for anybody to look at what he does and say that it's not this. No decent person would look at that and say this is acceptable behavior. It's not, and on so many different levels. In fact, let me see if I got a video to show. This was a very short clip. That I pulled up this morning. I'm not going to credit. Let me see if I can find this. No, I'm not even sure where it went. But there was a clip of the crowd. That's last week. Let me try one more spot. This was a clip of the crowd going after the O'Keefe family and making them run the gauntlet. And this was filmed from inside. Just see. All right, found it. So it is pulling up. Give it a second. And I don't think the volume came through very good on this, but this is the O'Keefe. If somebody has a better version of this clip, send this to me. But this is the O'Keefe family walking into court. This would have been during the trial, not the most recent hearing. But the boos of the family and the shouts against the family were deafening. And so I don't have my volume on, so I'm not even sure if you guys can hear this. When I just used a screen recorder to record it, and it seemed to lower the volume by about 80%. So, but it was this is how they treat the family. Not because they think the family, well, although Sean does think the family's involved in the conspiracy, but most of the other ones don't think that the O'Keefes are directly involved in the conspiracy, but they blame the O'Keefes because they don't believe in the conspiracy. And that's it. And that's enough to attack them. So this is the kind of people we're dealing with here. Can't be into there's no false equivalency. This is what they do. This is what they are. And it's not like everybody in that group is like that. No, but it is, the majority of them are, and the silent ones are going along with it. So they share in it if you're going along with it. The Dude Abides. I love that movie. Thank you, dude. Appreciate the contribution. And in a world of sheep, he says, be a wolf. So we will do the best we can. I think everybody here epitomizes that and identifies with that. And certainly, so on the 9th, if you really want to be a wolf, go out there and support the family. Now, it's hard for everybody to do that. You can't all reach there. And not everybody can get the day off. I think the hearing's at 2:00. But it was important Oh, I have another clip too. If I can, I should have prepared it for you. That shows how buoyed Peg O'Keefe was at the last hearing when she arrived and the family arrived and they saw the support. She gave a fist pump and she really had a spring in her step. So that kind of made it worth it. But even if you just like the idea of standing up with against the bullies, standing up with the small minority that's picked on by a wild witch hunting mob. So the way I put it, when you were a kid, imagine yourself a kid again. Imagine yourself in the 6th grade. And let's say you're imagining it from this current perspective. So this is how you would do it now if you could do it over. You're in the 6th grade. Maybe you're inside, you got detention, you're finishing up a test or something like that, and you walk out onto the schoolyard. And on the schoolyard, there's a large group of kids chucking snowballs at a couple of the smaller, weaker kids or the kids that are just disliked. What side do you join? What do? You got 3 options, right? You can ignore the fray, go and hide somewhere, maybe go back into the classroom, right? And just say, oh, I have to work on my test. Or you can join with the bullies because you got the numbers on their side and that's where the cool kids are, right? Or you can look at that and say, I want to go stand with the kids getting picked on because they need my help. That's the way I look at this here. There is a large, irrational mob, a mindless mob that is following this case, that is attacking the family, attacking the witnesses. Now, maybe you don't have time to get there. Like I said, I'm not making you feel guilty if you can't get there. But if you find any appeal in the idea of standing with the smaller group against the bullies, then they could really use you there Tuesday. And if you have any questions about that, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to Kate. Exactly. If you want to get a t-shirt, you can also go to the website, justiceforjohnokeefe.com. And if you can't find it that way, reach out to me, leetskev@gmail.com. Anybody can reach out to me anytime, and I'll get you in touch with them. But if you want to go stand, just typing that in. If you want to go stand with the courageous minority that is getting picked on by the bullies, this is your chance. This is your chance to show. It's your chance to redo 6th grade all over again. Only this time, if maybe you or one of us or any of us made the wrong decision back then, don't beat yourself up over it. You were a kid, but you're not a kid now. And now you have a chance to go and do the right thing and stand with these people. It's not about trying to persecute somebody. It's about trying to defend justice, the justice process, and trying to defend innocent witnesses and try to defend the family of the victim. That's what it's about. So if you can find it in you, if you're interested in doing that, your support would be greatly appreciated. I also want to mention, so I have the Discord going, and this is for members of Yellow Cottage Tales. It's just, I'm trying to find ways to repay them back. So if you are a member and you go to the Discord, I'm going to keep it open all of the time during shows now. And if you message me a question or a comment that you want me to share with the audience, that's a place that I will be checking. I have it open, and so I'll be checking continuously. So if you're listening now and you are a member, open up your Discord. And if you have something you want me to see, actually, sometimes you can help me out too. Like if I'm looking for a video or a clip or a photo, and you can find it quicker, you can put it there, and I can bring it up. So that would be a great help to me. But also, if you have a question or a comment, you can put it there. If you are a member of Yellow Cottage Tales, which is, I think, $1.99 a month or $2.99 a month, it's just the basic things that we need to keep the lights on. If you are a member and you want to join the Discord, just email and I'll send you the invite so you can join the Discord. It's a pretty small group, and we're working on things. It's new, but please just reach out. All right. So let's get to, so we're going to go over Delphi, Ellen Greenberg, and then we'll get back to Karen Reed. And in Karen Reed, we're going to discuss again, but there's more information on this. I looked at the surveillance video again. I want to show you something. This feeds a little bit into the idea of whether second-degree charges made sense. I did a little bit of legal research too, to look into some of the strategic decisions that go into whether or not sometimes you may want to go with second degree, even if you're not sure, not comfortable that, or not confident that a jury's going to find. There's still maybe a reason to go with second degree. There's a lot of stuff to look into. We'll discuss too what we think might go on during the hearing on the 9th. But let's go to Delphi, because I'm going to give you a little bit of background on this too, just in case you have not followed the Delphi murders. I should have I didn't have time today. I was doing some filming. Let me hit the share screen. I should have had time to put together a slideshow for you so you'd have the pictures of the case, Monon High Bridge, and all that stuff. And actually, I have some really good videos that I've done in the past on that really highlight it. So the Delphi murders, some of you might know it as the Snapchat murders. This was on February 13th in Delphi, Indiana, in 2017. And you'll remember the case, even if you're not following it that closely, because the girls, before they were killed, one of the girls took some video of the killer as he was coming across this bridge. And then he said, "Guys down the hill." And she picked up that recording of it. So it was very unique, and that these girls actually managed to film their killer. And that murder, that remained unsolved until finally Richard Allen was arrested in November or the end of October of 2023. And his trial is this October. Now, yes, Joan, it is this is the kind of case that when someone first asked me to do it, I'm like, no, I am not doing any of these cases with kids. But it is also a case where there's a lot to be learned. And I'm going to go into some of it today and some of the new stuff that's come out. Really interesting stuff. And this is going to give people a lot of ideas about how defense teams really work. And not even necessarily a criticism, but just they're doing their sworn duty to do everything they can to try to get somebody off. But we in the public need to understand this before we go too far down some conspiracy rabbit hole. All right. So Delphi, if you can picture in your mind the bridge, so there's an old trail that's a public trail that's run by the city. Delphi is the population is under 2,000. It's a very rural area. And even though it's under 2,000, that's kind of a metropolis compared to the towns next to it. Some of the towns next to it have a population of about 8. It's a very, very rural area. So this Monon High Bridge, it was once a railroad bridge, and it's been defunct for decades. It's now crumbling. It just has the railroad ties on it, but in some places the ties have fallen through. So it's not a safe bridge. The Monon High Trail is run by the town or the state, and it leads up to the bridge, but it technically ends at the bridge. However, people are going to walk out onto the bridge for a couple of reasons. Sorry, I forgot to plug in my power. All right, so it's a beautiful area, and the bridge crosses over Deer Creek. It crosses high over it. I don't know the measurement, but I'd say it's at least 100 feet over it. Frank Perry, thank you very much for the contribution. He says, "I am sick of these YouTuber channels. Now Umbrella Guy is now saying how TB is wrongfully accused." I don't know who that is, but yeah, it's obviously crazy. And so is Karen Reed. So yeah, it is really, and hi, Govinda. And so, yeah, we'll get back to Delphi in a second, but just if you want to, this is the dilemma, right? I'm actually, as far as what I want to do with this channel, it's a little bit of an existential crisis, because when I started the channel, that's why I gave it the name Yellow Cottage Tales. I wasn't really sure wasn't that interested in true crime, maybe a little bit. I didn't know what I wanted to do with it, discuss anything that might be an interesting story or whatever. And over time, I kind of got sucked going down the road of true crime just because I did on a story on the Andy Puglisi story, and that's still very well received on the internet. And then I did a story on I did a series on Lizzie Borden, and that was very well received. That's the first one that I narrated myself. And then people had asked me that watched that, can you do the Delphi murder? So I started looking into that. And I actually came up with a profile that eerily matched the killer who was caught just coincidentally a month later. But I was still on the fence about the whole true crime thing. And then obviously got sucked down the Karen Reed rabbit hole. But here's the thing. If you want to succeed, if you want to grow an audience in the true crime world, true crime genre, thank you, Sailboat Wolf. I appreciate it. And Sailboat says, thanks for fighting against the toxicity. This is exactly what we're talking about, right, Sailboat? Is that if you want to succeed, you actually have to go in the direction of toxicity, in a sense. You have to go in the direction of what's titillating, what's conspiracies, what's juicy, what makes an interesting story. So in the Karen Reed case, if it's just a hit and run case, that's not very interesting. So you're not going to get a big audience. Same thing with the Delphi murders. The more you believe that this is some wild conspiracy, before they caught Richard Allen and his defense team came up with the Odinist theory, there were hundreds of thousands of people that believed that the family was involved, the family of Libby, and particularly her sister, and the father, and the mother, the grandmother. And they believed that the girls were part of a satanic killing. Right? Why? Because it's juicy. There was never any basis for it. Never any basis for that. Any of it. But that's way more interesting than other options, you know? So if I'm going to launch a YouTube channel, if tomorrow I start doing videos showing that the Sandy Hook massacre of those first graders, that was all just some kind of a false flag operation, like Alex Jones says, you know, if I go down that road, I will instantly multiply my audience. Right? Any kind of juicy road like that. That's the way the internet works, because the stuff is more interesting to people when you're doing something that's conspiracy oriented, or in other ways, controversial, satanic mysteries, or devil, you know, anything, any number of things that has that kind of juice to it, you know? And I refuse to do that. I will never do that. I mean, I don't mind. I shouldn't say never. Like, I wouldn't mind doing it if we're having fun with what was the Jack the Ripper, something like that, because it's harmless. You know, it's not, if you want to tell me a vampire was secretly the Jack the Ripper, I'll play along. Why not? I'm a writer. I like that stuff. That's fun. But if you're doing things that involve real modern cases where the families are still alive and they're victims, and cases where you're going to accuse innocent people of being part of it, no. I am not going to do that. I can't do it. But then if you're not going to do it, how do you make your channel survive? How do you ever get to the point where you can have enough of a faithful audience? How can I make it interesting to the audience? How much can I make this topic interesting to you? It's a fair question, right? Even though, so a lot of people that I'm sure have tuned into this channel for a little bit, realized that I'm covering Karen Reed, heard the argument, seen the evidence, realized there's no conspiracy, and then they have no understanding. We have no reason to continue watching me. That's a reality. That's a reality. So I don't know. I am a writer, and I have a bunch of older short stories and half fiction novels and screenplays. Maybe I just every Friday night or Saturday night discuss a little bit of the latest of what's going on with Karen Reed or some other cases, and then try going down the fictional road. I don't expect it to be big, but maybe it might be entertaining for somebody, or maybe it might be good, at least to help, if I do it late enough, help put people to sleep, right? Hey, that's a value in that, you know, but I have to find a purpose for this channel is a challenge, you know, in a way that's going to build an audience but I'm never going to exploit. Like, I'm looking at now Howie Carr for the Boston Herald and the Boston Herald itself. They're exploiting this to get views. So it's not just people like Turtle Boy or LTL or Sean or any number of other people who are exploiting this. It's also mainstream media. So what can you do? I don't know. It's frustrating. So anyways, back to Delphi. We're going to get to some good stuff here. And for those of you that are really interested only in Karen Reed, trust me, this stuff that I'm going to go over in Delphi is relevant. So the Monon High Bridge was a perfect trap for predators that a local realized that. So especially it was February, it was school break, so the kids had it off. And the way the bridge was, the creek is like 100 feet below, maybe more. But that's only at the beginning part of the bridge. But then the bridge is like 700 feet long. So the creek is maybe under the first 100 feet. And then after that, if you continue, you're going over woods and hills until it comes to an end. And where it comes to an end is on private property. And there are signs that say trespassing, proceed no further. And the locals in Indiana seem to have honored that. So anybody going to that end of the bridge, it's basically a dead end, and they got to turn around and come back. Well, the killer recognized that. And he also would have recognized that adults, because of the danger of the bridge, it wasn't like it was the most dangerous in the world, but it was not comfortable to cross either. So they would have realized that most adults were not going to walk to the end of the bridge. But kids would be unable to resist the temptation. If you're a kid, you're 12 years old, and you're with your buddies, there's no way you're not going to chicken out. So you're going to walk to the end of that bridge. And so the predator knew this, and he knows he's waiting at the front end of the bridge, waiting to see some kids walk along that bridge. He knows because they're kids, they're going to go to the end, and he knows they're trapped and they're going to have to turn around. So if he starts down the bridge, they're going to wait on the other end. And then now he's got them, if he's got a weapon or something like that, or he's got some other way to control them. So and this is what seems to have happened with Abby and Libby. So they were 8th and 7th grade, best friends. Truly, it's heartbreaking. It's easy. For a while, it was hard to talk about this without getting teary-eyed. And some of the information that's come out now makes it even more so. But they stayed faithful to each other to the end. I don't know. Do we see that kind of loyalty in adults? I mean, even when one of the girls had a throat slit, the other one didn't run, it seems. So the girls crossed the bridge. They did take a couple of pictures on the bridge of themselves. Just here we are, the dare, going across the bridge. Libby had crossed it before, so she was faster to cross it. Abby was only in the 7th grade, younger, because this was her first time crossing it. They got to the other end of the bridge, and then they saw Bridge Guy, he became known as, and really is almost certainly Richard Allen, was hobbling across those difficult ties, hurrying to catch up to them. And they already knew he was creepy. There's like something, one of the girls is caught, I think, saying something like, is that weird guy again, or something like that, or is that weird guy behind me, I think Abby said as she was getting to the end of the bridge. And then one of them is heard saying, is that a gun? And then when he gets there, he obviously points a gun at them and says, guys, down the hill. So he takes them down the hill, marches them about 5 feet along either a private road or through the woods, then takes them across the creek. Now, it's February. That water is frigid, but the creek is maybe a little over your ankles. It's not deep. But those girls would have known by then that they were in deep shit, that somebody made them walk across that frigid creek. And the reason he did that was because he was going to have to anyways, because he was parked on the front of the trail, and there was no way to get back to it without crossing that creek unless you went up and back and crossed the bridge. But he wouldn't want to cross the bridge after killing the girls. He's covered in blood. So he brought the girls to an area not far from the bank of the creek, a very secluded spot, and that's the spot that he killed them. Now, there's some interesting things that happened in this case. That some new information came out, the prosecution revealed during the hearing. So, as I said, the defense team has tried to suggest that Richard Allen was not there, and that it was an Odin cult that ritualistically sacrificed these girls. They managed to bring in an expert we'll see this. This is, you got to see this. And all right, so they bring in an expert, someone who has consulted the FBI, and she testified that this had all the hallmarks of a ritualistic killing. All right, we'll see more on this. Is that going to hold up? All right. In addition, they claimed that there was sticks laid in the shape of antlers around the girls and in other forms, odinous kind of forms. I don't believe that's going to turn out to be the case, but it would be interesting to me if it was, because before any of this was identified over like a couple of years ago, I put out a video titled Antlers, and I predicted that there would be symbols of antlers at the crime scene. But I would love to be able to say that I got that right, but I don't think I did. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think he just used these sticks to try to cover the bodies a little bit, but the defense is going to claim that they were arranged in a symbolic way. In addition, the defense is saying that they drew a rune. If you guys know what a rune is, a runic symbol, like an Old Norse symbol, they drew a rune in Libby's blood on one of the trees. And we'll find out more about that too. We finally got that drawing, or whatever, that mark was on the tree. But now we have an explanation for it from the prosecution. Now, one of the things that people are grifting on now, though, in the YouTube world and in the LawTube world, even some fairly respectable lawyers. So data, right? Data can be abused. This is an issue here. This is going to be increasingly an issue in modern trials. In every trial, data gets abused. So the girls went missing pretty early. Their parents sounded the alarm that they were looking for them and went to the police by like 3:30, 4 o'clock, I think, maybe like 4 or 4:30. So they assembled a team to look for them, but then it was getting dark. It's February. It gets dark early. Some people did stay out all night looking for them. They didn't organize a more deliberative search until sunrise. And then they went looking in a methodical way for the girls. They found their dead bodies at about noon the next day. But while this is going on, they're pinging the girls' cell phone. Well, Libby's cell phone. Abby did not have a phone. So they're pinging Libby's cell phone. And there's some weird data that came out that at the time the police looked at this. All of a sudden it lost contact with the phone for a period of, I think, of hours. And then it reconnected at some time in the early morning, like say 4:30 or 5. We'll see in the article that I'm going to go over in a minute exactly what. But it reconnected at that time. And when it reconnected, all of a sudden it started, messages started going through from all the people that, friends and family that have been texting Libby, where are you? Where are you? That kind of thing. All of a sudden, all those messages went through. They connected at this time around 4:30 a.m. So the police, looking at this, said at the time, looking at this, so while the girls were missing, they said, oh, this means the girls are no longer in the park. They're no longer at the location because it's no longer pinging there. And then when it started pinging in the morning, they said, oh, this means that they've been returned to the area, or their phone has been returned to the area, or something like that. They didn't. So the defense is looking at to say, aha, see, something happened that the police don't understand. Those girls left that park and were returned there, or at least, the very least, the phone left and returned there, right? So this is like really useful stuff for trying to build a defense theory, right? But there will be an answer for it, and you'll see shortly. But this is something the defense keyed on, and a lot of people, including lawyers, including lawyer Lee, jumped on this and said, wow, this could be reasonable doubt. The police seem to think that the girls left the area at that time. So what happened? What really happened? Is this the basis for reasonable doubt? Let me have a drink of my... This is a drink that I take for energy. It's just water with kratom in it. It's legal. Gives me a little energy boost. There are some different things that I take. People after the cancer discussion were like, yeah, there's no way he could still be alive after 6 years with that diagnosis. I mean, I went live into my patient portal and read you the test results from October in 2018. but I am lucky. My particular cancer, the genetic marker of my cancer, was eligible to be treated with what's called a targeted therapy. And this targeted therapy, basically, my amateur understanding of it would be there are what goes on at the molecular cellular level is a lot of messenger stuff that is necessary within your cells. This messenger runs to that, messenger runs to that, and that allows cells to basically divide and grow into new cells. And so this is how cancer grows. And they, for this certain type of cancer and for a few others, they managed to find one particular enzyme that's needed in order for that process to continue, and if they can, and design a drug that shuts it down. And so, and that's generally all it does, is shut that particular thing down, and that stops the cancer from dividing and growing. So it doesn't eradicate it, but it stabilizes it. But it does have the effect of eradicating a lot of the loose cells over time. And I was lucky that have been granted a lot of time for that process to continue to work. Now, normally this therapy is good for less than 2 years, but about 2 years. But that's an average. So some people get a year, some people get more. I got more. Now, I took the approach from day one that I was going to try to fight it. So I did a lot of research, tried a lot of things. Did I do a GoFundMe? Yes. 6 years ago. It ended 6 years ago. The GoFundMe lasted a few weeks. And the reason I did it was because I hadn't even been diagnosed with what type of cancer I had yet. I just knew that I had some kind of metastatic stage 4 cancer that was widely spread. And some friends had said, why don't you look into the THC cure? That's cannabis oil. And it was expensive. And I didn't have that kind of money. So I thought, just trying to save my life, that's it. I was like, I've never asked anybody for anything. I was like, maybe if I do a GoFundMe, which I had never done before, maybe I can raise part of what I need to try to come up with for this THC oil. I set up the GoFundMe. Then I said, you know what? I'm not comfortable doing this. And I never did anything with it. But I told one of my writers' friends about it, and she told another writer friend, and these writers put it out. And so I think it raised about $3,400 or something like that. That all came from writers. Every penny came from other writers. It didn't come from friends or family or contacts on Facebook or any other social media. I was years away from having a YouTube channel. I didn't have Twitter. So I had no way to raise it, no interest, no even knowledge of any of that stuff. It was posted in a writer's forum called Simply Scripts. It's for screenwriters. And so people knew me there, and they contributed to it. And that's it. And I forgot about it until the turtle writers dragged it up and saying, is he using all of this just to raise money? I forgot all about it. And you can't contribute to it. That account's was closed 6 years ago, almost 6 years ago. So that's the only time I ever ran a GoFundMe. And that's the story on that. But I do believe in fighting back. I did eventually try the THC cure. To my knowledge, it didn't do anything. It didn't shrink the tumors in any way anyways. I tried a lot of other supplements, but I can represent. Oh, hi, Dina. Good to see you, Dina. This is one of my excellent screenwriting friends here that I was talking about. So hi, Dina. And she can confirm that that's how it happened, because I think Dina was the one that actually posted that in Simply Scripts Dina was trying to help save my life. And I am still here. So thank you, Dina. Appreciate it. But she is the friend that she's not really a true crimer, but she just popped in to support. Thank you, Dina. One of my best friends. And I did try the THC, but so one of the supplements that I can tell that I can report to you guys you might be interested in is very simple. It's pretty cheap, although it's gone up a lot. And I can tell you that it works for some things almost miraculously. And it's called bromelain. And all it is it's an enzyme that's extracted from pineapples. And I had seen that my nieces were using this when they were in high school and they had their wisdom teeth out. My nieces had used this so that their cheeks wouldn't swell up. And I remember when I was a kid and I got the wisdom teeth out, I actually, really wanted to work the next day. And it was something that I had to be in the public, so they weren't going to let me work if there was any swelling in my face. So I stayed up all night, icing my cheeks, hoping that would prevent it from swelling up. And it didn't do anything. Alvin the Chipmunk, totally totally went up like that. You know, there seemed to be no way to stop it. But yet these girls, my nieces, were able to do it with pineapple juice. Pineapple juice. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. That something is that effective on inflammation, at least in your mouth. So, knowing how important cancer thrives within an environment of inflammation. So I'm like, could this potentially have an effect on inflammation generally in your body? And I don't know that it does, but I said, maybe I'll try it, you know? And I looked it up. Bromelain, you can buy it at Amazon. So I buy the pill, the capsules. And I also, one of the side effects from my treatments is canker sores, mouth sores. And I thought, if it works on swelling, maybe it might work on that. It works miraculously. I don't mean it works a little. I mean, the canker sores you get from different types of chemotherapy is not like regular canker sores. I've had canker sores that you get them, they last a month, and they leave permanent scars in your mouth. It's worth it to be alive, but that's one of the drawbacks with it. This works it works ridiculously well. You could, if you suffer from cankers, I can tell you, I can promise you, because I've now given this to other people that have tried it. My cousin in New Hampshire has always had a problem with canker sores, and she swears by it now. Her husband. If you find yourself coming out with canker sores and you pop 2-3 of these for a couple of days, they're overnight. The canker sores are reduced to like nothing, and they reduce to something that's not painful, and then they're gone within a couple of days. It's miraculous. Now, if it has other effects, Ghost Rider, yes, everyone is different. If he gets the cankers, try the bromelain. It's called bromelain. Bromalaine, I believe. You can get it on Amazon. It's pretty cheap. When I was first getting it several years ago, it was only like $15 for a bottle of 100. Now it's gone up to 25. So I think probably more people are aware of this. So obviously my nieces were aware of the pineapple juice thing because of social media. That's how that spread. And does it have an effect on cancer? I don't know. I can say that probably has no connection, but the tumors are not supposed to go away. But over the last year, the 3 brain metastases I have dissolved and disappeared. And they were there for the first 5 years, for 4.5 years. And but that's it. The main tumors in the lungs are still the same size. So I'm not saying that you should expect any kind of a miracle on cancer. No, but who knows? It could help when in combination of other things. All right. So it's back to Richard Allen case. So why don't we go to this article? I think I'll fill in any more blanks on the crime as we go. So Richard Allen, the Delphi man accused. So they did their pretrial hearings this week. It was 3 days of it, and the last one was an 11.5-hour pretrial hearing. We didn't experience. They do things different in Indiana. I can't imagine Judge Canone in Massachusetts doing that. So this wrapped up 3 marathon days of pretrial hearings. Now, based on what I'm reading here, I really expect Richard Allen to plea, but we'll see. But there's going to be some really interesting stuff here. You'll see. All right. So Richard Allen, it's been known for about a year that in prison, he confessed to, over the prison phone, so it's admissible, he confessed to his wife and his mother over the phone. So the defense attorneys have to come up with a theory for that, an explanation for that. And what they came up with was that this part of this Odinist cult theory, that there were 2 guards working for the prison that were part of the Odinist cult, and they forced him to do these false confessions. Well, it did turn out that there actually were 2 guards that were wearing Odinist pins on their shirt. Seems weird, but different states, whatever. Now, it's since then, the warden is not allowed that. But there were 2 guards. Now, that doesn't mean that they forced a false confession, but you see how they're able to wrap all this stuff into a conspiracy theory, just like we see with the Karen Reed case. You're able to take a lot of different things and stitch it together into a theory that starts to sound coherent. All right. And so is it possible that Richard Allen confessed a couple of times like that? Well, we now learned in this hearing that according to the state, he's confessed more than 60 times in prison, including to like the prison psychologist and to anybody that will listen. So it doesn't sound too plausible, this idea that he was forced. Unfortunately, that trial is not covered on TV for understandable reasons. You know, there's no cameras, but we don't even, it'd be great if we could get a transcript. We can't. So all I really get is this, an article like this. This seems to be well written, but I'm really a documents guy. I'd much rather have the transcript, but it doesn't seem to be the case that you can get it. So the prosecution is trying to block, as we saw with the Karen Reed trial, they're trying to block the defense team's alternative theory. That's the Ovid theory, that pins the crime on a group of Norse pagan worshippers involved in a ritualistic sacrifice. The judge, whose name is Gull, is expected to rule on those questions later. The defense has already tried several times to get Gull removed. In fact, at one point, because the defense leaked the crime scene photos, these horrific crime scene photos. Now, they say they didn't intentionally leak it. Somebody that worked for them did. But because of that, the judge actually had these defense attorneys removed. But Richard Allen didn't want to lose them. And so when it was appealed, the Supreme Court in Indiana returned these public defense attorneys to his defense, because it's not, I mean, what the judge did was understandable, but there's a really strong part on any court, on any Supreme Court, appeal court, to want to let people have, sorry, I was just reading a note that came through, to want to let people have the lawyers that they want. They're going to be very reluctant to take that away. The lawyers that you think you need to defend yourself. Okay, on Thursday, Allen's attorneys won one battle they'd been fighting and losing since shortly after Allen was arrested. All right, so they managed to get him. So he was put in prison, but normally somebody that's in when somebody hasn't been convicted and sentenced, they're going to be kept in jail. But for whatever reason, he had been transferred into a prison, but now they got him returned to a jail. For initially, they put him there for safekeeping, they said, but the defense team wanted him removed. So, all right. So the prosecutor's name is Nick McClelland, and he wants to limit words, phrases, and implied references during the trial. We saw this in the Karen Reed trial too, right? When the prosecution wanted to prevent the defense from going with the third-party culprit, which is the same thing here, basically. So they want to block references to Odinism, cult, or ritualistic killing, along with the names of the 6 men. So again, this defense team, just like Karen Reed's defense team, didn't just blame some anonymous people. They actually have 6 people that they have claimed were the real killers here. And the prosecution has shown that some of these people have, irrefutable alibis. But if you go and you read the Odin theory that they put together, they managed to find some things like that to the public definitely would look weird. So, for instance, Abby was only in the 7th grade, but she was dating, or they used the word dating, I don't know, but she was hanging out with some guy that was older, like 16 or 17 or something like that. And her father was involved in this Odinist movement. I guess it must be a legitimate Odinist thing out there in the Midwest, kind of a white supremacy kind of thing. And he supposedly, investigators had found some odd drawings on his Facebook and stuff like that. So they start trying to pin the blame on these people. It's enough that you could stitch together a theory that could convince people that aren't very good at weighing actual evidence. This is the problem. So just to pause here in the article, the reason I know or the reason I'm very confident that Rich Allen is the guy, and there's really no other possibilities, is because Richard Allen, the day after the girls' bodies were found, he went and did an interview with a conservation officer. We don't know why, okay? But it may be because he thought that somebody on the trail had ID'd him, because he worked and had worked for years at a CVS. So in a small town like that of, I think it's population 1,800 people, you work in a public position like at the counter at CVS, you're going to be very recognizable to most of the people in the town, especially after you've been working there for years. So, and he also hung out in a bar that was there. He was a big drinker. He hung around a lot in the bar, and he was in pool leagues. There's actually some video of him. You can look on YouTube of him playing pool. He's a pretty good pool player. I think I could take him, but so anyways, Richard Allen went and parked about 1:30, and he parked in a weird way to hide his license plate, witnesses saw. And then he walked to the front of the trail, and as he was entering the trail, there were 3 underage girls leaving the trail. So when Richard Allen spoke to the investigators the next day, he described seeing those 3 girls at the front of the trail, and they described seeing him with pretty accurate descriptions. Not that they didn't recognize him, but they described someone his size and wearing his clothing being there at that time. So then he walks to the trail it's not a long trail. I think it's maybe a mile or a little less than a mile. He walks that length to the bridge, and then he's on the bridge in that front part looking down over the creek. And a young woman also hiking the trail arrived a few minutes later, and she testified to seeing him. So the same guy in the clothing looking out over the creek, and he testified to being on that bridge. He said he was looking for fish. Okay, so his own words put him at the bridge at about 5 minutes of 2. And then he said he never saw Abby and Libby. Well, the young adult, she had seen the guy on the bridge, thought he was creepy, so she turned around and headed back. And along the way, she passed Abby and Libby, like 2 minutes into her walk. She passed Abby and Libby heading in the opposite direction. They were heading towards the bridge. So there was just no way that Richard Allen could not have seen Abby and Libby. There was nowhere else to go. There's no other parts of the trail. So unless you went off and hid in the woods or something like that, there was no way that he wouldn't have seen the girls. And so that puts him right there. And then on the road going back in the direction of where his car was parked, another witness driving her car around 3:30, I think, 3:30 or 3:45. She saw someone, again, same general description in terms of age and clothing as Richard Allen, and he's walking along the road in the direction of where we know he parked his car and where he said he parked his car, and he was where his clothes were said to be muddy and bloody. And so at the time when she's driving by, she thought maybe he'd been in a fight. She didn't. This is because she didn't know the girls were missing at this point. Nobody knew at that point. So all that really puts Richard Allen right there in his own words and with the witnesses. Now, there is the other main piece of evidence is they found between the girls' 2 bodies an unspent bullet shell, and that shell was later matched to a gun in Richard Allen's house. Now, there's some controversy with matching unspent shells. That's a relatively new science, and in some areas controversial, because matching a bullet that's been fired is a lot easier because it's gone through the barrel, and that's going to leave markings on it. But an unspent shell is different. But there is still a science behind doing that, so the defense will obviously try to poke some holes in that. Not sure if there's any other evidence. There are some questions here, like why it doesn't seem to be the case that they found any of Richard Allen's DNA on the girls. If that's the case, that hasn't been released. And that seems weird, right? Why wouldn't there be some DNA on the girls? And I believe he actually owned the same car. And so when the police arrested him 6 years later, and they took it into custody, and there's no indications by anybody that any traces of blood was found in that car. Now, you can spray a car like that. You can spray something with luminol, and you can find out traces of blood that are very difficult to remove. So did he over 6 years manage to scrub that so clean? maybe, but as far as so there were some odd things, and as far as we know, no other evidence was found inside the house that matched. He would have gotten rid of all his clothing by then, presumably, his boots. But, it seems like something should have been able to find some blood or some DNA, but nothing was. But nonetheless, to me, this is like no case is perfect. And to me, there's enough evidence here that really puts Richard Allen. There's enough evidence without the confessions. But now he's confessed over 60 times in prison. They're going to have recordings of it. And you're going to have people testify he confessed to the prison psychologist. He had information about the crime scene, according to the prosecution, we'll see here, that only the killer could have had, in theory. That's why police always hold back details of the crime scene. So police contend that the Logan Sport man, so this is one of the people that knew the girls, and they're saying the defense is trying to say was one of the killers. The prosecutions contend that he has a clear alibi, and that's why. So he had posted drawings and pictures on Facebook that were eerily similar to the crime scene. Now those have not been made public, so we don't know how similar they were. Is that just the defense saying that? As you'll see, this is why you can't trust defenses, though. We'll get to some other things in here that really highlight why you really have to be careful anybody honest paying attention to the Karen Reed case, even if it's the first case you've ever followed, should now understand, even if you still believe that Karen Reed is innocent, that there were things that you can't trust the defense. You can't completely trust the prosecution either. I'm not trying to, be unfair about it, but the defense, this is their job, is to sow doubt, and they're going to twist words. So you get Alan Jackson talking about a non-human hair, bullshit. A gap in the library video, bullshit. None of that was true. None of that existed. None of that was even remotely true. So they're going to spin things, and they're going to walk right up to the edge of lying, and they know exactly how far they can get, where they leave just a little bit of plausible deniability that they can't get brought up for lying to the court. They walk right up to that line, though. So the man's name and the others accused in this third-party defense aren't being named here. So you can find them online if you look for them, but I'm not going to release them either. So the prosecutor argued Thursday that the defense couldn't just toss out any theory during the trial unless there was evidence. And he said the prosecution is going to be able to debunk the ones the defense team has offered, and that Allen's attorneys don't have the evidence that connects someone else to the crime. Then it's going to get more interesting, though, I promise you. The name Keegan Klein is going to come up, and we finally have a big mystery in this case. Seems to be solved about it, but it's a little bit of a mind blower. So, and it tags into true crime YouTube channels. We'll see in a moment as I fill in the blanks in this article. There's a lot of stuff here that you'll see coming up over and over in these cases. So a series of witnesses Thursday gave very different looks at the crime scene, looking to tilt. So each side got to present witnesses here. So it is different than the Karen Reed case. So they're presenting witnesses now already in the pretrial hearing. So I'm not a lawyer, but I'm guessing that this is where the judge will have to decide if they're allowed. And that's why they're being presented here. Is what they're going to say relevant to the case? So it's a very, tightly controlled thing. Each state has their own laws, so you're going to see some differences in how things are handled. So there was an expert, a ritualistic crimes expert, whose name is Dawn Perlmutter, and seen a little bit more about this. She is the director of the Symbol Intelligence Group and a subject matter expert in ritualistic crimes. And she testified that based on crime scene photos, a presentation of Facebook posts from suspected Odinists and defense team depictions, that this was textbook ritualistic murder. It has all the characteristics. That's in quotes. Now, This Dawn Perlmutter is also someone that has consulted the FBI. She's been a consultant for the FBI in the past. So wow, those credentials look right. Like those look great, right? She's an expert in this. She's got kind of a title, and she has been consulted by the FBI. Okay, this sounds fascinating. But some of the things that the prosecution pointed out, one was that she had gone on court TV in 2023 before the defense team had hired her or given her any evidence. And on court TV, she said the same thing. This is a textbook ritualistic murder. But she said that without having really seen any of the evidence. So that's kind of revealing. The evidence that she pointed to, she said the arrangement of sticks left on the girls that Allen's attorneys have contended were Norse runes. So the defense team is saying these sticks left over the girls were in specific shapes that were symbolic of Norse ritual, Odin symbols, maybe runes. The prosecution says no, they were just kind of a crude attempt to cover the bodies. And this expert pointed out to the way the girls' bodies were arranged, that they were killed in a small clearing in the woods, given the Odinist connection with nature. All right. She's using the fact that they were found in a clearing in the woods as some part of the evidence. That's ridiculous. This is a wooded area. And many times killers like this are going to kill in the woods because you're doing something very illegal. You're killing someone. So you're not going to do it on Main Street. You're not going to do it in the parking lot of CVS. You're going to do it in the woods. Many killers have operated this way. And if you're in the woods, you're probably going to operate in a little bit of a clearing. So there's nothing Odinist at all about that. As I've already described, this was I call it a Venus flytrap for predators. It was the perfect trap. He would have recognized this on other occasions. He was an outdoors guy. He lived a mile away. He was a guy that spent time fishing and hiking. And he would have observed the behavior of kids on that trail, and he would have recognized the kids are going to go to the end and be stuck, and you got them trapped. So there's going on, she says, a marking made with Libby German's blood on a nearby tree. And what she said appeared to be a symbol. In my opinion, she says it was an intentional mark. All right. We'll get to, there's a really interesting solution to that. So, but what the defense has been saying since last year is that that the killers or the killer took the blood of Libby German. She was the 8th grader, and made, whether with their fingers or with a stick, a rune symbol on a tree. And we'll see there's another explanation for that. And it's interesting. She also says how they were killed with cuts to their necks. And that's ritualistic style. I mean, he had a gun and he had a knife. But if you shoot them, you're going to draw attention. So you have to understand that. So he eventually has told the psychologist that his motive was sexual assault. But to this point, I don't think there's any evidence that the girls necessarily, there was any, you know what I'm going to say. I'm trying to be sensitive about the language, but there was any kind of what many people would think of as sexual assault. But with these kind of killers, the killing itself is a sexual act. That's what gets him off. That's what the fantasy is. Okay. They don't always have to do something, overtly sexual. Now, maybe we'll find out that Richard Allen did, but there's nothing revealed yet at this point that said he did. But that doesn't mean, for instance, if they don't find any semen or they don't find any penetration, that doesn't mean that it wasn't a sexual assault. It was a sexual assault. It's just, it all depends on that particular sick individual's fantasy. So the prosecutor challenged Perlmutter's testimony, asking whether she'd seen or heard other evidence in the case, including against Allen, or whether she just looked at angles spoon-fed to her by the defense attorneys. Now, this is what we saw in the Karen Reed case, right? So the ARCA guys, the engineers, the accident reconstructionists hired by the feds had no interest in the tech data, right? It's revealing. This is how defense experts work. Now, they were not supposedly defense experts, but in the ARCA guys, but they clearly were. And the giveaway is the fact that they didn't ask for the vehicle data and they weren't offered it. So they were hired for one purpose, and that was to create reasonable doubt about the state's theory that John O'Keefe was killed by a vehicle. That's the only purpose that these guys were brought in. They weren't brought in to find the truth. Josh Levy wasn't interested in the truth. Never was. Not interested in it now. If he was, he could have corrected this a long time ago. Josh Levy had no interest in the truth. He has interfered in this investigation. And there's a lot of evidence for it, but let's just stick with that one thing. He did not give the TechStream vehicle data to the ARCA guys. And the ARCA guys, who are on their website, bill themselves as experts in Toyota TechStream data, did not ask for it. So it was very similar to having a medical examiner do an autopsy without a body. So this is what defense teams do, though. Rich Green, when in the Karen Reed case, when he's the main claim behind the 2:27 a.m. search. So the question he had to, now that was something that was printed up on the Celebrite. His version of Celebrite did create that report that said that Jen had searched for how long to die in the cold at 2:27. But the question is was that an error? Was that essentially an artifact that was a glitch, or was it accurate? Because it was very, even just standing from 2,000 feet, you can see that it was odd that both sides accept that she also made that search at 6:23 and 6:24. So why was she also making that search at 2:27? It seems very strange. Just going to punch into Discord for a second, make sure. So anybody that's in Discord, anybody that's one of our members is eligible to join our Discord. And if you have any questions, we'll always monitor that live to see if anybody has a question for the show. Looks like they're just having a conversation and nothing to do with Discord. So nothing to do with questions for us. So that's good. But I'm not going to mention, I never mention names because most people, for understandable reasons, want to remain private. But if you're in the Discord now and you have a question or a comment on this, please chime in there. I'm happy to bring it to the audience. And if you want to join our Discord, just email me if you're a member and I will send you the invite. So again, Rich Green had no interest in finding out when he was contacted by Celebrite, by Ian Whiffen, the programmer and main data analyst for Celebrite. He wanted to reach out to him to explain that data. He didn't take the call. He wasn't interested. Because his job is not to get to the truth. It's to create reasonable doubt. And it's the same thing here with this Perlmutter. She didn't get all the evidence that was available. They didn't give her all the evidence. She didn't ask for it. She's just finding enough to try to help them. So why? Because it makes her prominent. This is one of the most prominent cases in the world, and it's going to get a lot of business for her, right? And who knows? Maybe she'll pop up on a YouTube channel soon, right? This is how it works. People are willing to grift on the truth. It's alarming how many people are willing to do that. So he also questions, so this is a really good question that the prosecutor asked. Why would the Odinists, who are white supremacists, why would they pick two white girls to kill if they're white supremacists? It's a legitimate question. I think the defense is going to say, I'm not even going to go into it. It's so ridiculous. But so the prosecutor also pointed out to a September 20, as I mentioned, September 23, 2023, when this Perlmutter went on Court TV. So let me just. Again, thank you, Jimmy McNutty. Thank you to Dude Abides. Thank you, Frank Perry. And thank you, Sailboat. Appreciate it. And just looking to see if there's any other big comments I need to get to. Thank you, Tom Fleming, for being here as always. Tom is at his picnic table, possibly drinking with Brian Higgins. I'm just kidding. He's I don't think he is, but Brian Higgins also is from Brewster, and that's where Tom Fleming is right now, in Brewster. All right, so let's get back to the article. So I love this question. I don't think they're allowed to ask these, at least in Massachusetts, in the trial in front of the jury. I'm not sure. Maybe Mahoney can tell us on this, but he asked this expert, if you change your mind now, in other words, haven't given all, more of the evidence, if you change your mind now, would that hurt your business? I mean, because this is the same question, you look at also the dog expert, the dog bite expert that emerged in the middle of the trial for Karen Reed, who had no interest in the DNA, the canine testing. She had no interest in it. She didn't even mention it. She tried to pretend that it didn't exist. And then when they pointed it out to her, she had no interest in it. So these things are kind of a dead giveaway when you're just not, these experts are not actually interested in the truth. They have some other agenda. It could be just because of what they're getting paid, and they want to make a business out of getting paid at this. It could be prominence, fame, want to be involved in the case. Why did this woman in Los Angeles, who happens to be where Alan Jackson's office is, why did she reach out to Alan Jackson and say, hey, I got something to contribute to this case? Don't know. Does she just want to be relevant again? She's been retired for many years. You just don't know. But she wasn't interested in all that key evidence. And her testimony was not convincing, I think, to neutral people. All right. So one of the other things this Perlmutter had said in the Delphi case was that she has said that the girls were killed by a ceremonial knife of some kind. There's no evidence of that. And let's look into the questions. So Richard Allen has now told people that he killed the girls with a box cutter. Now, keep in mind, box cutters aren't as simple as we think. That little thing that has a sliding blade on it, that's the usual box cutter. Probably everyone has one in the garage. And if you ever worked a job in a warehouse or in a factory, I did, or in the receiving or shipping department, you have a box cutter. But there's other kinds of box cutters too. So we're not exactly sure what Richard Allen meant by that. But all this Perlmutter knew was that he was killed by a blade. There's you get the cut of a blade. Yes, technically, some experts would be able to decide. An FBI expert might be able to look at that, or other homicide expert, criminologists, and tell if it was a serrated knife or a sharp blade. But this Perlmutter isn't that kind of expert. So she had no basis for saying that this was a ceremonial knife. No basis. Her expertise, if she has it, is on symbols, not on wounds. All right. Attorneys brought back. All right, this is interesting. So Richard Allen's attorneys brought back to the stand Kevin Murphy, a former Indiana State Police detective. Well, let's see. These guys have a Murphy, who's a little bit controversial, as we'll see. And we have one in the Karen Reed case, Peter Murphy, who thinks that the Secret Service is consulting him and tipping him off, and that they tipped him off to the attack that eventually was a middle-aged woman weighing about 85 pounds, assaulted Turtle Boy. And this is something that the Secret Service was concerned about. So there's my great grandmother was a Murphy, so Murphy's a common name, but there are Murphys. There are a lot of commonalities in this case. Murphy testified earlier in the week that he and the other investigators thought there was an undeniable connection between the Logansport man, this is one of the Odin people, another from the Delphi area, and 3 men from Rushville, that's an area, I think it's like 60 minutes away from here, who were all wrapped up in the Norse pagan religion. So keep in mind that this crime was unsolved for 6 years, and it was, like I said, really traumatic for that state. The brutal killing of these 2 young girls, 13 and 14 years old. And catching these killers has meant everything for that state. Everything. And that's was So everybody's trying to get to this for years, trying to solve this. And so you want cops to go down some unusual roads because you never know what's going to lead to something. And so this cop went down a little bit of an unusual road and maybe connected some dots in a way that, at this point should be discarded. But so he was the one that looks like was probably initially trying to connect this Odinist angle. This is long before they caught Richard Allen. So Murphy testified Thursday that one of the men from Rushville asked him after an interview in early 2018 if traces of his spit were found on one of the girls. But he could explain why, he said. So, but he wanted to know if he'd still be in trouble. He wanted to be in trouble if they found traces of his spit on one of the girls, would he still be in trouble? This is according to Murphy. This is not documented. It's probably documented in his notes, but it's not like you can hear it. And so Murphy says, I was stunned. Murphy said he made the mistake that day with the man by not getting him back in the car, grabbing lunch with him, and finding out more right away. It is weird, right? Like if somebody said that. Still, Murphy testified Thursday that he immediately started to chase that lead and connecting the dots between the men. So if this guy really said it, is there some other explanation? As we'll see, a lot of times there usually is. So and you're saying like, wow, if he spit on the girls, who's spitting on girls, right? Only killers would do something like that. But sometimes things have other explanations, and maybe he didn't even really say that. Who knows? Murphy said the working theory in the early days of the Delphi murder investigation was that based on the scene and the timelines, the crime likely needed 2 or 3 people, possibly 5 or 6 to pull it off. So again, these are misconceptions. This is because these cases are rare. And I remember when I first started looking at this case too, I actually was wondering if possibly the killer, I actually, the same thing. I thought maybe was there 2 people? I'm no expert in, and this was definitely no expert. And this was early on in my effort to try to look into true crime cases. And I was like, so I thought either there was a couple of guys that did this, or maybe it's one guy that really just knew how to control children. So I was thinking maybe he was someone that had law enforcement experience. Did he possibly handcuff the girls with some cuffs or something like that? Did he tell the girls, you're trespassing here and you're under arrest and I'm taking you home to your parents? That would be a way to control them, right? But so it's understandable that they thought maybe there were 2 or 3 people that did this back then, but possibly 5 or 6. Why would they think that? That's weird, because there are other cases, the toolbox killers and some of these ones where there were accomplices, but I don't know of any cases where there were accomplices where there were 5 or 6. I think the accomplice thing was always 2, and there was one guy in Texas or California that had different accomplices, but he would have kind of a young apprentice, and then eventually he'd get rid of him and get another young apprentice. So I don't know if there was this idea of this ritualistic killing with 5 or 6 people. This is fiction, but it's always had a grip on the public imagination, particularly going back to the 1980s when you had the devil worshiping fear. People were widely afraid that rock and roll was devil messages on the back of, you play your record backward and you can hear the devil message. And, and there's these widespread satanic cults. That was a real fear in the late 80s or early 80s. And I think in some parts of the country, it still resonates. So maybe here it's still this idea that 5 or 6 people did this ritualist. There's no example of this in real life anywhere. So he testified that investigators he was working with had monitored social media accounts of these men, and they seemed to know things that no one else would know unless they were involved or weren't there. So when the defense attorney had him compare crime scene photos with Facebook posts by one of the men they had been investigating, Murphy held his head in his hands and wept. So that was this week on the stand. This retired trooper, Indiana State Trooper, held his hands and wept. So he believed in this. And he said, it sucks, wiping his eyes. Todd Click, a former Rushville police officer, so from the town where one of the guys Sutton, the defense theory blames is the real killer, testified that he'd worked with Murphy on the Rushville angles of the investigation. He gave his theory on the crime from the stand Thursday. He said, so this local cop said that the girls had met the son of the Logan Sport man on the trail that day, found themselves at a Norse pagan ritual, and made fun of it. That was the reason they killed them. So this, you got this Odinist theory, okay, and there's reasons to scoff at it, but look how what the defense is able to do. They're able to get a local cop to say who investigated this to say he believes in it, and a retired Indiana State Trooper who investigated this early on to say he believes it. So here in Karen Reed, we got nothing like that, but we do have the feds. They were hooked. They were snookered, right? And so it's not like this is the commonality here. Defense lawyers can listen. It's amazing how gullible human beings are. And I'm not saying that these cops are bad cops, but they can look at the evidence against Richard Allen, and it's really powerful. He's confessed over 60 times in prison, but they still believe this Norse pagan angle. So this is the problem with these trials. So now the judge has to make a decision here as to whether or not to even allow this. But I would imagine that if you get a Judge Canoni here who maybe is inclined to allow it, that could lead to reasonable doubt. And this killer of two innocent young girls, this killer could be set free. So these are difficult decisions for a judge to make. You want to always give somebody the chance to defend themselves as best as possible. But my God, this is disturbing. So the prosecutor asked the local cop, Click, is it fair to say your belief is just a theory? And the cop testified that he had uncovered no direct evidence. So is he going to be allowed to testify? He doesn't have any evidence, just had a theory. The prosecutor argued that the Logansport man had an alibi, that he clocked out at the Liberty landfill in Buffalo, Indiana at 2:45 p.m. Now the girls were killed at about 2:30. And Buffalo is a half hour north of Delphi. So that's a damn good alibi. And then he checked in at a fitness center in Logansport, again, half hour north, at 4:08 p.m. So this guy was nowhere near Delphi. So, but, people aren't going to give up on a good theory, including lawyers. There are some dumbass lawyers we see all over these cases. Not going to mention Mark Petterell. Oops, I just did. So these guys have been cleared because they have alibis, and there's no way they could have been near the Monon High Bridge Trail when the girls were killed. Pressed by the prosecutor, Murphy also said that the leads didn't land on hard evidence and admitted to the prosecutor that he'd once said he thought the man in Rushville had been playing him. All right, so, and we're going to see more about this playing stuff. It's going to get more, trust me. So this cop still believes in it, this former state trooper. So there's two cops here. This one, Murphy, is the former state trooper, but he admitted that he'd once said that he thought the man in Rushville had been playing him. Okay. So clearly he wouldn't have said this on the stand. He wouldn't have admitted that he once thought that the man in Rushville was playing him. The only reason he's going to admit it is because he had prior said this to someone else. So that shows you the danger of this too. So if he hadn't have said that, we wouldn't even know it. But here's a guy that's clearly been duped. All right. So the blood stain pattern expert was a Major Patrick Cicero of the sheriff's office. And he gave sober, chilling testimony about the blood found at the crime scene. So if this bothers you, you'll have to check out for a little bit. Sorry. Based on his review of the crime scene photos and documentation, Cicero testified that Abby Williams was killed while lying down. He testified that Libby German was standing at some point after being cut and then eventually sitting down based on the patterns of the blood found. So it's just brutal. So standing after being cut. So I don't know if this means that she was lying down, had her throat cut, and managed to get to her feet, holding her throat. Her hands were found with blood all over them, and then collapsed. I don't know, to a sitting position. Just the horrifying ending that this innocent girl faced. I mean, unbelievable. The idea of letting this guy off. He testified that the position of Libby's body suggested that she'd been dragged by one arm to where the killer eventually left her. How Libby was positioned, he said, was more about how she'd been moved than some sort of staging. So for those that are looking for staging, you see like a certain way the legs were crossed and arms are crossed and things like that. And so this guy is saying that was not staging. It was just he dragged the body for some reason. She may have been still alive at that point. I don't know. A defense memorandum filed in September of 2023, that's last year, contended that an Anzus rune shaped similarly to a sort of F was made with Libby German's blood and found on the tree near the crime scene. And now we'll get the explanation for that. Cicero testified Thursday that he found the mark on the tree to be akin to an upside down L. He said the mark was 3.4 times 7 inches, and it showed signs of blood flow on the tree. So he said he ran tests to see how the mark got there. And this is amazing. So this guy had his own blood drawn by the Indiana State Police phlebotomist in order to test it. So he donated his own blood to go out and test this on a tree. He said, we needed the blood right away. So he testified that he tried to recreate the mark, using a stick and then using his fingers. So he took the blood and tried to create that so-called rune on the tree. And I don't know what kind of tree it was, but it's not easy to draw on a tree, right? Because it's a very rough surface. And each time he found that he had to reapply the blood on the rough bark several times to come close to the safe effect. I think it's meant same effect. I think that's a misprint. All right. But here's the explanation. A 5'4" test subject was able to make a similar upside down L mark with the base of her palm on her hand, turned the pinky finger up and reaching back at the tree. Reaching back. So I guess like this. So Libby had been found with blood on her hands. And she would have been in a similar position. So the poor kid, she had her throat slit. She must have went like this, stood up to try to get away, and then reached back for the tree. And her bloody hand left that mark on the tree. The defense calls it a rune. It's just a handprint. I mean, this is the kind of stuff you see in these trials. And you see it in the Karen Reed's trial, 227 searches and crazy theories, dog bites. It's what you see. Asked by the prosecutor, Cicero also said he'd seen other incidents where killer tried to conceal a crime scene with sticks. So this guy, this police expert had seen other crime scenes the attempt by the killer to hide it with sticks. It's not I don't know how, wasn't able to really hide it very well. So is it more of a symbolic thing going on in his mind? I don't, in the killer's mind, I don't know. But he said that he thought that's what's happened here. So the defense attorney asked him if he thought it was odd that the sticks covered maybe 3% of the girls' bodies and had been arranged in certain ways. Cicero acknowledged that it might not have been a good job of concealing the crime. So the sticks only covered 3% of the girl's body, so it really didn't conceal the crime. So is it just kind of a symbolic effort? And then the question, and we won't know until we see, we're not going to see drawings of it. We don't want to see drawings of it, but the jury will see what these sticks looked like and were they are actually arranged in some kind of pattern, some kind of a symbolic pattern. Did they represent antlers or something else? Or were they just kind of thrown there? We don't know. There was when the defense team put out their theory back last September, they did have some drawings of the sticks. And if I remember right, the sticks that were left over Abby looked more random, but the sticks that were left over Libby were more, at least according to their representation, looked more like something deliberate, like a pattern. And that's where they come up with the idea for antlers, that the pattern over the head was in the style of antlers. So we don't know. We'll have to see. So this is, all right, Libby's phone. This is interesting. So the sergeant testified that new tests were being run now on Libby German's phone, the one she used to capture the man walking on the bridge when she got the video. And the technology is better now than when they ran this back. The last time they ran the tests on it was in 2019. So we'll see what this produces. But testimony Thursday also revealed that her cell phone was still working at 4:33 a.m. at 4, which is a day late, So that would be almost 12 hours after they were killed, which is, more than 14 hours after they went missing. The phone found at the crime scene connected to a tower at that time. At 4:33 a.m., it suddenly connected to the tower and started collecting at least 14 text messages after it had been out of service or out of range. So, I've seen different explanations to this. We won't get it all here, but I have seen that there is a thing with cell phones when the battery is low, it'll go into you've seen this on your own phone, it goes into a low energy mode in order to save things. And so it does limited things. But then if it's about to die on some of these phones, with its last burst of energy, it will send out a final signal to the cell towers and it'll take in messages. I don't know if that's true, but I've seen this explanation in other spots, but it just shows that these things are complicated. And this is an area where cell tower signals are very sparse. This is why they weren't able to, even when they had the signals, triangulate the phone. There wasn't enough cell tower coverage. So it may be that atmospheric conditions were such that the signal was not able to reach Libby's phone. Libby's phone was found under her shoe underneath Abby. So looks like it was placed there by the killer. In all likelihood, it seems unlikely that the phone and the shoe would end up underneath Abby if it was just dropped there, but possibly, So it connected at that time and it got the messages. But in the hands of defense, they're going to say this is evidence that the girls were moved. But here's the thing. The new information about the phone shows they're able to determine this must be, I don't know if it's a health app similar to John's phone. This was an iPhone 6 that the girls had. This was in 2017. But they were able to show that it last moved at 2:29. So that really, if you believe that, destroys the idea that the phone somehow mysteriously moved from the crime scene and then moved back at 4:30 in the morning. Defense attorney argued that the new information about the phone poked potential holes in the Logan Sportman's alibi, suggesting that the girls might have been taken somewhere out of. So the defense is saying that the girls might have been taken somewhere out of cell range and returns the next morning. Now, if this sounds absurd to you, right? So the girls were killed at about 2:30, and the area was being thoroughly searched. at sunrise, at being searched before sunset, and some people have been out there in the night searching too, all night. But the defense is arguing that the girls weren't even there, that they'd been only brought back to that scene. It's absurd, okay, to think that if you kidnap these girls out of there and you've transported them to an hour away, why would you ever bring them back, knowing that everybody is looking there for them? Why would you ever risk that? It's absurd. Just as it's absurd that the Alberts are going to are going to beat John to where he's clinging to life inside the house, and then they're going to bring him out and drop him on their own lawn. It's absurd. It's not a reasonable thing to believe in. It's just not. And weird things happen in life. So if the evidence was there, but there's no evidence to show that happened. So but people just don't weigh evidence very well. It's very frustrating to me. I get frustrated with it. I don't know. All right, now let's get to the Keegan Klein connection in this. And I'm sorry this is going on for a long while, but this is an important. I'll stay on as long as I have to discuss this, because this is a very important case, and it has implications for any case you're going to look into, including Karen Reed. So Keegan Klein was the guy. The other way people know this case is it's known as the Snapchat killings. And the reason is because this guy, Keegan Klein, who was in his, I think, early 20s at the time, or maybe 25 years old, I forget his exact age, was a creep. And he created this false identity, which is what you do when you're catfishing. You create a false identity and you say that's who you are. And so in this case, he took this picture of a young male model out of whatever, and he created this fictional character called Anthony Schatz. And this Anthony Schatz fictional character was trying to get underage girls to send him, he would send them money. He'd cultivate a relationship with them over social media. He told them all he was rich and showed that picture saying he was a good looking guy. And in exchange for sending them $20, they would, flash them their boobs or something like that and show that to them. And so this guy, in addition, though, he eventually was caught so he had been catfishing among many different people, Libby German. He had been catfishing her. In fact, he had even sent her some money at one point. She thought he was real. She was in love with this guy. But there's no evidence they ever met. It's just, and Keegan Klein wasn't going to meet anybody because then the gig is up. Then they realize he's this fat, creepy looking dude that's 27 years old, as opposed to a 17, 18-year-old model that drives a race car. That's what catfishing is about. So, but Keegan Klein, when he was finally arrested a couple years ago, on his phone was truly troubling pornography that he had downloaded, not that he had made, but that he had downloaded, from I don't know where you get that stuff off the so-called dark web or whatever, but violent sexual acts against really young girls. He even also, I think, had an obsession with the Sandy Hook killings. I don't know if he tried to find the pictures of the kids. So really, really troubling, disturbing stuff, that this kid wasn't just reaching out to 14-year-old girls and getting them to flash them or something. He had an interest in violence against kids and young girls. And so he was sentenced last year for, that's called CSAM, child sexually inappropriate material or something like that. I forget exactly what the acronym's for, but he was sentenced to 45 years, first offense. But that's how serious the stuff was on his phone. And there's no evidence that he's ever tried to meet anybody or did anything violent, but he was using false information to entrap these girls and stuff. So the question was always, was he because he was catfishing Libby, was he somehow connected to the crime? Now, he lived in the town of Peru, Indiana, which is like 20 miles away. He was not someone that liked to drive. He had an anxiety about driving. He really barely left his house. He lived with his father, him and his father. Okay, so for years, the police were trying to figure out if this guy had a connection to the crime. And I've read, so the YouTube channel and the true crime people called Murder Sheet, I think they might be lawyers too, had scored one of the big coups you might see in for true crime community when they managed to get their hands on the police interrogation of Keegan Klein. And I have that. I've read through it many times, underlined in it, tried to get as much evidence as I can from it. And there was a lot of stuff that Murder Sheet, though, that proved, that reported over subsequent months that turned out to be false. So I don't actually have a lot of respect for Murder Sheet because of that. And I felt they were kind of grifty at the end. I'm not faulting him for all the false things. Sometimes you get a false report and you run with it and then you correct it. But it seemed to be an awful lot of false things that really dragged the discussion down past logic on this case. And so, but then, so let's see, that was, so summer, it was fall of 2022. So it was November of 2022 or late October when they finally arrested Richard Allen. But at the late in the summer of 2022, so August and September, the police took Keegan Klein, who hadn't been sentenced yet but was arrested for the CSAM. They took him to a military base in order, because he had agreed to go there. It was clear he was cooperating with them. We never knew exactly what it was, but it was clear. And then they searched, using incredible resources, a river near Keegan Klein's house in Peru, Indiana. They spent a month dragging that river near the bridge. And I remember seeing the pictures of it, and they had about 24 every day, about 24 Indiana State Police SUVs there. So they used enormous resources to try to search that river. And about a month afterwards, seemed to go nowhere. But then literally within a few weeks of that, they suddenly arrested Richard Allen. Now, we don't know if they were tipped off. But what I believe happened, or have long believed happened, is that they didn't find anything connecting, anything relevant to the Delphi murders in the river. And they only would have been using those kind of resources if they were trying to find something connected to Delphi, the state's biggest crime. So I believe they forced themselves to finally go back to square one. And that's when they found the old interview with Richard Allen that was just in the bottom of a shoebox somewhere or something, And then they pieced it together. But they had avoided seeing that at first because of tunnel vision. First, they had tunnel vision on this guy, Logan. His last name was Logan. I can't remember his first name. He owned the property, pretty large homestead where the girls' bodies were found. And he had made a false alibi while the search was underway for the girls, but before the bodies were found. He had called the nephew and constructed a false alibi because he knew that if the police found him, he wanted an alibi. And so the FBI looked at that and they said, that's your guy. Nobody would make a false alibi like that before the bodies were found unless he was the killer. And so they got a search warrant to search the house. And they didn't find anything. But here's the thing. It was tunnel vision all along because this guy, Logan, was in his early 70s, wasn't very healthy. And that bridge is not easy to cross. So, and also he's over 6 feet. I think he was like 6'2" or 6'3". And Richard Allen is like 5'5". And I think that most of the eyewitness testimony had Bridge Guy being about 5'7" or 5'8". Nobody had it over 6 feet. So it really could not have been Bridge Guy. But yet the FBI got that tunnel vision on that. And I think this tunnel vision is the main reason police don't solve crimes. It's because they start excluding other things. Now, sometimes they could be going down the right road, but in this case, they weren't. And then at some point later on, they developed tunnel vision on Keegan Klein, and they ignored all other evidence. Now, you can see why, though, they had, as I'll show you in a second, there's some really good reasons that way they eventually had some tunnel vision on Klein. So, the prosecution is trying to get the judge to prevent the defense from using the name Keegan Klein. They don't want to present him as an alternative suspect. So, Indiana State Police Detective David Vito testified that Klein had told investigators that he and his father, Tony, so get this. So this would have happened right before they searched that Wabash River. So in 2022, summer of 2022. So Keegan Klein told the investigators that he and his father had been at the cemetery near the scene in Delphi. So the girls' bodies, if you, I'll pull the map up some other time, but so Richard Allen, as he left the scene of where he had killed the girls, he had to walk through a few minutes of woods, and then you come to a cemetery. And then you walk through the cemetery and you get to the road, and that leads back to where Richard Allen's car was parked. So there was a cemetery right there, right near. I don't know the exact distance, but say, a few hundred yards, maybe even less than that, from where the girls were found. I don't remember the exact amount. So Keegan Klein said that he and his father had been parked there, and that his father, Tony, went into the woods for an hour and then came back with blood on his clothes. Wow, you can understand why the state police figured, wow, they got the guy. So Keegan Klein sold out his own father. They sold out his own father. Okay, was he telling the truth? He said further that on the way home, they had stopped at that river, at that bridge, so that his father could toss a cell phone and a knife. Now, by this time, when the time Keegan Klein was telling this story, everybody knew that the girls were killed by knife. So that was public information. We didn't know exactly what kind of knife, but you knew this because the scene had been described as very bloody. And nobody heard gunshots. So pretty much everybody knew. So it was not hard for Keegan Klein to know that. That's not some kind of special knowledge. So the question was he telling the truth? That he was in Delphi with his dad on that day. And then his dad went into the woods and then came back in the car. Keegan Klein told this to the police, his own father, and that they threw the cell phone and the knife into the river. So that's why the police, they were sure they had their guy 2 years ago. And if we were in the true crime world and we knew what the police knew, we'd be like, yes, that's the guy. It's got to be Tony Klein. Keegan Klein just came forward and ratted on his father. Only it wasn't true. So this Detective Vito said the Indiana state police they systematically searched the river. Police found other cell phones, knives, and firearms, but not what Keegan Klein told them would be there. He said that the investigation later found that Klein had lied and hadn't been at the cemetery near Delphi the way he said. So that's just his testimony. Is it true, right? What is Keegan Klein saying now? Has Keegan Klein admitted that he's lied? Now, he's done interviews from jail and he never has said that. He's been sentenced now. So had Keegan Klein been telling the truth on that, he would have used that to get a lenient sentencing, but that didn't happen. He wasn't able to do that, but that seems to be what he was trying to do. He knew he was facing significant time and he was willing to lead the police on a wild goose chase in the hopes of making the police happy, I guess. I don't know. Hopes that they would find something that they could use to implicate his father, but somehow police know that they haven't explained here. Somehow police know that Keegan Klein was lying about this. So just a couple of other items on this, on jury selection. So the crime was in Carroll County, but they're getting the jurors from a county that's 2 hours away, Allen County. It says jurors in the Delphi murder case will come from the Fort Wayne area, nearly 2 hours away. Wow. So they actually going to make these jurors commute 4 hours a day just to come into this trial? Are they, are they going to limit? Does that limit the time of the trial during the days to just a few hours because they got this long commute? But this is the length that they've had to go through to make sure they get a fair jury, because they say that the jury pool in Carroll County, which is where Delphi is, has been contaminated. So the court made the move in hopes of finding a pool of people who aren't familiar with the case in ways that they are in Carroll County. So obviously, this is the most famous case in Indiana's history. So you're going to get jurors that know about, all the jurors are going to know or likely to know about the case. But they're hoping to get people that at least aren't as familiar with the victim's family, the victims' families, the killer, I guess, stuff like that. Maybe the bridge. So this is obviously something that the defense probably asked for. It says jury selection will take 3 days starting October 14th with 100 potential jurors called at a time. So they got to get, what an enormous difficulty to put on these people. And you think of like older people who have to be in a car for 2 hours. Obviously, there's a limit to the age of jurors, but still, it's going to be difficult to get these guys, to get these jurors in there, to seat a fair jury. I'm just looking through some more description of this. So Allen was charged in late October of 2022, a big turn in the case that had gone unsolved for 5.5 years and that hadn't seen an arrest at that time. Investigators tied Allen to the scene after revisiting an interview with him. So yeah, this is it. Nobody ratted. This is just, nobody tipped them off. They revisited an interview with Richard Allen in the days after the murders when he told police he'd been on the trail that day going to look at fish from the bridge, but that he had not seen the girls. So if you allow me, I'm going to pat myself on the back. If you allow it, I know it's obnoxious, but I give good analysis on this stuff. This is what I said at the time, and I have said ever since. People have said that the police knew about this because they got a tip. No, they went back. This is what I just said to you earlier, and I hadn't even read this far in the article before. No, they just went back to square one and found that interview. Something that they had just was there, sitting there all along in their files. They just hadn't looked at it. So it says he was there at the time and he somehow didn't see the girls. Investigators say witnesses' descriptions put Allen there, as I've already described to you. And they also pointed to the discovery of an unspent bullet that they say found near the girls' bodies and that matched the handgun Allen owned, according to her probable cause affidavit. So also it says court documents indicate that investigators believe they hear the sound of a gun being cycled and one of the victims mentioning a gun. So this is interesting. This is terrible, but if they heard the gun being cycled, oh my God, this is an awful thought to think of. That suggests that phone might still have been recording when the girls were killed, because when the gun was cycled, that's when the bullet was ejected at the crime scene. It was found between the two girls. So that means, it seems to mean they were still being recorded. So Libby was a hero. She pulled up her phone, and filmed the bridge guy coming at them. But we know that there's more to that. We never have known how long it is, but she must have hid the phone in her pocket so it could record what happened. So I wonder what else. Hopefully there'll be more useful evidence, but I can't believe if they actually, that means it might have been on when it might have recorded the killings, which is just terrible. And hopefully the public never hears it, but hopefully we'll get some information from that. All right. So before we get back to Karen Reed stuff and the upcoming hearing, I just want to, so I did find some more information on the Ellen Greenberg death, but let me pull up this one thing if I can find it. I found a crime scene report. I'm going to pull this up, but it's going to be impossible for you guys to read it because it's honestly, I can barely read it myself. All right, so this is I think this is the police report from the responding officer. I arrived at the scene at 2:27, 2027, sorry, and was met. All right, so the woman's fiance, Samuel Goldberg. Sorry, his name was Goldberg, and hers was Greenberg. I was mistaken about that before. I thought they both had the same last name. And so family and some friends were also present. So just trying to read through this. So Sam, they lived together. They were engaged. He left the apartment later in the afternoon to go to the gym. The gym is in the same building. And he returned a couple hours later and was unable to get into the apartment. He opened the door with his keys, but the door was secure from the inside. And so we learned this last week when I was looking at this. And the two big questions that I had are answered here is, well, I'd still need to get more on one of it, but what kind of lock was this that was closed here? And the big thing was, what floor do they live on? And that's answered. So he proceeded to try and contact his fiance with messages and phones. She's locked inside and he can't open the door. And he's wondering what's going on. So he tried contacting her for approximately an hour before he forced entry into the apartment. An apartment security man was reportedly present. So he went and got security, but security was not comfortable with breaking in the door. But he's obviously a strong enough guy that he was able to break the door. And I don't know why police weren't called before this, though. So I don't know. I guess he figured I guess he had no reason to think she was hurt at that point. She just was ignoring him, maybe. I don't know. But he didn't call police initially. And this went on for a while. And then he finally broke in the door. And at that point, he found her on the kitchen floor. And the security man was apparently with him when he broke in the door. So he was not alone when he went inside. The security guy went in. That's when he called 911. He was briefly instructed to start CPR, but then he noticed that there was a knife in her chest. And at that point, he was instructed to stop the CPR. So a lot of this is, people look for all the little things to be suspicious. And when he first called 911, he didn't notice that she had a knife in her chest. And it was basically a steak knife that she had used, a serrated steak knife. And so people say, oh, why didn't he notice that right away? I mean, I don't know exactly what position she's in. I think her hand was on the knife, if I remember right. So is she bent a certain way? He's in shock. For whatever reason, I don't think it's suspicious that he didn't see the knife initially. We don't know exactly how she was in a semi-seated position on the floor. They're now trying to say the body was moved, but is that suspicious that if you go in there and you find your loved one has been stabbed to death, whether she did it herself or someone did it to her, there's a tendency to move that person a little bit, right? So, but here's what some of the other questions. All right, so the location is the kitchen. This is in the Venice Loft Apartments on Flat Rock Road in Philadelphia. It's a 2-bedroom apartment on the 6th floor of the building. Now, this is the key. So it's locked with it's described here. The front door is a common latch / solid bar door guard. And it's broken with the screws from him pushing through. So that sounds very similar to me to a deadbolt. But I'm not really sure. I don't know why they don't call it a deadbolt. So, but there's some kind of a lock that was similar to a deadbolt that was locked from the inside. Now, it's how can how could the killer, if he's the killer, how could he have locked it on the inside and then get out? And so the question that when I talked about this case last week was, well, maybe they live on the first floor. Maybe they live on the second floor. If you're on the second floor, you can still go out to the balcony and kind of swing down to the street or the alley or whatever's there, the parking lot. But I don't think you can do that from the sixth floor unless you're Spider-Man. I mean, so if the guy, he's got a security guard with him that witnesses him, they can't get into the door and he has to break it to get in. How could it have been locked from the inside? So to me, I don't really understand how this could be a conspiracy. And I'm not trying to dismiss people that have looked into this longer and believe that. So I'm not, please don't think that I'm being dismissive. Just, to me, I have a hard time understanding how we could pull that off. And I guess somebody had said, well, it was possible to lock it from the outside, lock that bolt lock. I don't know. So you'd have to see exactly what it is. Could he, if he's trying to stage a crime, he goes outside the door and locks it? Was there a way using like a butter knife or something to close the lock rather? Maybe, I don't know. But that seems kind of weird to me. It seems to me just that evidence is going to be tough to get around. The reason people think there was a conspiracy, there's a bunch of reasons, right? But the main reasons were she was stabbed 20 times. And 10 of the stabs were in the back of the neck. And another stab was in the top of the head. So people say there's no way somebody could stab themselves 20 times. No, that's just simply not true. And for people to say that, I don't really understand how you say things like that and really don't think it through a little bit better. I could stab myself 20 times right now and not even be in critical condition. Because you're talking about shallow stabs. And there's a word for this in the suicide circles. I think it's called hesitation wounds. So you're not sure how to do it. You're hesitant. You've never stabbed anybody. You've never stabbed yourself before. And so you're kind of putting little wounds. So most of these wounds would have caused minor injuries. Now, one of the wounds supposedly nicked her spinal cord. So, but, it's medical examiners aren't going to be able to be sure exactly what damage that done. It didn't sever it, so there's no reason to think that she was paralyzed. There was some weird testimony where the medical examiner opined that maybe that numbed the feelings in her body enough where that dulled the pain, which made it easier for her to continue stabbing herself. But I don't think pain was an issue here, because this is a woman that, not that she wants to suffer pain, but she's having a breakdown. She's having a mental breakdown. It's really tragic, because you see the picture of her. She looks like a lovely young woman. She was a school teacher. This is not, but she had been suffering anxiety and was on medication for it, and only been on the medication for a month. And they had tried different medications, because the medication, one of the side effects is it can cause suicidal thoughts. And she was having that. And they did find on a computer that she had been looking for ways to kill herself on the computer. She had researched it. So it's a switch had gone in her brain. That wasn't her fault. She wasn't someone, I don't think, that had suffered from mental illness other than the anxiety. But the medication caused a switch to go off in her brain. And when that switch flicks off, you can do things that you would never otherwise do. And at the end of the day, looks like she stabbed herself a whole bunch. Now, these were all in locations where you could reach. There was no, and so she's going like this, does it in her head. It's not well thought out, because she's not in her right mind. And then eventually the last stab was, she's probably crying and raging or whatever. And the last one, she goes right into her heart. And that's where the knife was found. That killed her. So it's not unprecedented. A certain percent, there's a lot of suicides in the world, and it's a very difficult problem. And there's all different kinds of ways that people kill themselves. But this is not, there's no one way that is the most common, right? I'm sure this is going to be lower. Stabbing yourself to death multiple times is probably way below hanging yourself, way below jumping off a bridge, and way below shooting yourself. But it's not unheard of at all. There are plenty of examples of this happening. So we'll come back to this more, and maybe you guys can convince me that there's more to look at. Excuse me here. So let's go back to everybody's favorite case, Karen Reed, and we'll talk about some stuff that's coming up. Let me play a video for you guys too. So this was something I was, you go back and go over testimony in the trial, and it's hard to get through because obviously it's long, and it was hard to get through the first time. But when you do go through it, certain testimony, you will pick up things that you missed before. You heard it, but you didn't necessarily process it in the context of all the other evidence that you're looking at. So let me pull this up here. All right, so this is the library surveillance video.
The laser pointer there as far as what we're looking at in this particular
All
campaign.
right, so this is I'll pull forward a little bit here.
The directionality from where that.
All right, so this is the library surveillance video, a little bit
headed toward. What if any of the?
I don't know the exact time, but I'm going to.
Significance.
It's probably around
are located
5:15 a.m.
So again, Sherman Street,
5:11
Ave goes straight
5:11
to
a.m.
One Meadows. So if
So this
one
is
were
a
to
few
travel
minutes after Karen
from Meadows
left
Ave,
One Meadows.
residence of John O'Keefe, to
And
this location here, you would come down Sherman and you
probably
could take a
also
left
pull
on the
up a
Washington
map
Street to
for
head
you here.
south.
And
But
as
this
far
is-
as south on Washington Street, again, off to the right of the screen, what if any locations of significance in this
All right,
case
so
are located in that
this
direction?
street
The
right in
Waterfall
front of
Bar and
you
Grill.
here, in front of the library,
Now,
is Washington
as
Street.
far as the black SUVs you observe in this video,
the other
again, is that
street
consistent,
at the intersection there, so
black
perpendicular
SUV
to
you
it.
observed in the Temple video from
Oh my God, I can't remember the name at the moment.
12:17 a.m.
Yes.
Somebody can put it in chat. I can't remember the name anymore. But if
Library video
you're
from
coming from
12:17
One Meadows,
Yes.
And is it also consistent with the defendant's
and you
black
take,
Yes.
well,
Now,
basically, if you're coming from One
with
Meadows
reference
and you
to- are
stay
familiar with,
straight,
He's,
it kind of turns to the
ring
right,
cameras affixed to it?
and it goes
Yes.
north.
Are you familiar with
And
a,
that's the
video
direction
from those
that'll
ring
bring you
cameras,
to,
depicting the defendant backing
was it
the
Chadwick
black
Chapin
SUV
Street?
out of
Chadwick's
the
Chapin
garage
Street,
at approximately
and then
5:07 a.m.
Yes.
to
And
Meadow
from
to
that,
Fairview.
as far as
So if you're returning,
distance or time it would take to travel
did they even show that there?
from Mr. O'Keefe's
All right.
residence to this
So
intersection
that's
covered
the-
by the Canton Public.
Street
Right,
or
right,
Ave
right,
goes
right,
straight
right.
to
All right.
One Meadows.
So this is
If one were
Karen.
to travel from south.
And as far as south on Washington Street, again, off to the right of the screen, what if any locations
See if
of
we Get a
significance?
better
Now,
look over there. This is they froze here. So
as far
this is
as SUV you observed in the Temple
this is
video
her
from,
turning here. So instead of staying
12:17
straight
a.m.
and curving to
Yes.
go north,
also consistent with
to go to
black SUV
Fairview,
observed in the
she
library
actually
video
turns
from
left
12:15 a.m.
here,
Yes.
which
Is it
brings
also
her
consistent with
south.
the defendant's
So it
black
brings her
SUV?
away from
Yes.
Fairview.
Now,
But where does it bring her? It brings her in the
reference
direction
to- Are you familiar with
of the waterfall.
Mr. O'Keefe's home having ring cameras?
And
Yeah.
SUV out of Mr. O'Keefe's
why would she
garage,
do that, right? If she's
intersection
returning
covered
to
by the
Fairview.
Canton Public
Now, there's
Library.
some really good theories on this that people have said. All right, so there it is. There she is there. So she heads.
Stillman, if you could pause that.
And also, if you look at this, you get an idea of the snow. There's a couple inches of snow there.
Now, Ms.
So
Stillman,
this is
if you
around the
could,
time
fast forward to about
when
5
Lucky
minutes.
and the other plowers would be
5,
beginning to
15,
plow.
30
They
seconds.
wouldn't plow when there's, I think Lucky had even testified somewhere that they wouldn't plow until they had a couple inches. So then you see that next part of the video is her. Let me rewind that a
Now,
little bit.
Lieutenant, between these time frames,
So she goes to in the direction of the
now,
waterfall.
Ms. Stillman, if you could
And then
fast forward to
she
about
returns.
5 minutes.
Now
I'm sorry,
she goes
5,
back up in the
15
direction of
and 30
Fairview.
seconds.
So There, I think that's it right there. So
Pause there, please.
I don't have my speakers on, so I
Now,
can't
Lieutenant,
hear this
between
here.
these
So,
time frames of 5:11 a.m. and 5:15 a.m.
so anyways, so
at any
why
time do you observe the black SUV traveling
would
back
she
the
go
other
to
direction?
Fairview?
Yes.
And
I'm sorry, why would she
around
go
5:15
south
and 51
initially in the
seconds,
direction of the
Lieutenant,
waterfall
observe, on
if
this
she
video
knows that John
significant
is at
relevance
Fairview?
to this investigation?
A large
Well,
black
there are a couple
SUV
of good
will appear on the screen on the right-hand
possibilities.
side and travel to the left-hand
Now,
side,
one
which
possibility
again would be
is she
traveling
really
north
isn't
on
sure
Washington
where he
Street.
is, and part of her
Now,
thinks
as far as
maybe
again,
he really
directionality,
is still
north on
near the
Washington
waterfall.
Street to the left of the screen would be towards
That's
Temple.
I
Is
think
that
that's a
correct?
possible
Yes.
explanation, and it can't just be
And
dismissed.
as far
And
as
we're never
the
going to know, right? But it can't. If you're trying to
operation as far as
decide things beyond a
directionality is
reasonable
concerned,
doubt,
so what you observe
and you're looking for
in this
clues,
area
is
from
this a clue
5:15 is that consistent
that
with
when
what
she
you
went
observed
for
on
John,
the campus
she
library
really wasn't
video
sure where he
earlier,
was?
on 12 at
But the other
12:15.
explanation for
Yes.
And
is
again,
that
as far as the black SUV,
she
that you
knew
determine this is consistent with
that
all the
John
other
was at
black
Fairview,
SUVs you observed in the
but
video
didn't
and the
remember how to
defense,
get there.
correct?
Yes.
And so remember, she's been staying with John for a couple of years, but she's not from Canton. So did she initially decide to go to the waterfall in order to retrace her steps to get to Fairview? Because she doesn't know how to get there. Is that possible? I mean, maybe that's the car right there. I think that might be Karen right there.
And
Yeah,
Lieutenant,
so we
if
got
you
this is
could,
obviously
using
the,
a laser
so
pointer,
that's
you
at
have before you
5:15.
direct the jury's attention to where you
So at
observe,
5:15.
black
So she
SUV.
didn't really
Here on Washington
search
Street
very
near
long.
the
You
intersection.
see the pointer we're going at there.
Again,
So,
using that laser pointer, you could
so
just,
can you see the broken
indicate
tail light? You know,
jury
you
as
really
far as
can't
directionality
say.
with this
This is not a good angle for it because it's on the right
North
side.
would be to the left-hand side of the
So
screen
it's hard to
towards
tell from
Temple
here.
Beth Abraham.
But
Tell me if you could press play again.
question is can you see it there? Yeah, it's not definitive. So
If you could pause there, Ms. Gilman, you can take
either she really wasn't sure where John was, or
Now, Ms. Gilman, if I could ask for the
she knew,
Temple
but she
Beth
didn't know
Abraham
how to
video
get there.
again.
So she went to the waterfall in order to kind of
Young
orient
man,
herself
just
into
one
how to
moment.
get to Fairview. And we never know that. But how? So to what degree is that relevant for second degree? So let's go and look at definition of second degree. Another definition of it. There have been times on the channel when I have gone to the actual read you out the Massachusetts code on second degree. But I found this to be an interesting one here. This is from some place called Chambers Law Firm. I don't even, so 714. Oh, that might even be Massachusetts. 714. That is Massachusetts, isn't it? No, California. So California Super Lawyer of the Year in Criminal Defense. All right. So because every state's going to have different definitions. But this is worth reading here. All right. The definition of second-degree murder. At its core, second-degree murder is defined as the unlawful killing of a human being without premeditation, but carried out with malice aforethought. This term, malice aforethought, might sound complex, but essentially indicates that the perpetrator had the intention to kill or cause serious harm. Unlike first-degree murder, second degree does not involve a plan to kill beforehand. So, and then it expands here on just what that is. To clarify, let's consider a few scenarios. Imagine a person discharging a firearm into a crowded space, resulting in death. This act would typify second-degree murder because you're not trying to kill someone, but I think it might be different if you were planning to kill someone. So they're not talking about, for instance, like say the shooter that went after Trump. He's trying to kill someone. So I don't think that would be second degree because he killed someone that he wasn't aiming at. Similarly, a repeat offender of a DUI causing a fatal crash could face charges under this classification. So the emphasis here is on repeat offender. In this example here, another example could be delivering a punch leading to a deadly head injury. So this is if you get in a fight in a bar, right? like these major assault cases that Peter Murphy talks about, the Secret Service warned him about. These instances underscore the absence of premeditation, yet demonstrate a reckless disregard for human life. So that's the key thing, a reckless disregard for human life. So in the Karen Reed case, could you get that based simply on the fact that she was going backwards 25 miles an hour for 62 feet? Even if she didn't know John was there, but she could have known someone was there. And they were at an after hours party. Other people were going there. That's a reckless disregard. Is that enough for a jury to say, though? You know, that's the key question. The legal repercussions of a second-degree murder conviction are severe. Despite a common misconception, this charge is a felony with significant prison time attached. In some jurisdictions, like California, the sentence ranges from 15 years to life, escalating to a minimum of 25 years if the victim was a law enforcement officer or similarly protected individual. Further complicating matters, individuals with prior murder convictions facing new second-degree murder charges may receive life imprisonment. All right. Legal defenses to second degree vary depending on the specifics. Common strategies include claiming self-defense, pleading insanity at the time of the crime, arguing coerced confessions, challenging the legality of evidence acquisition, or asserting the incident was accidental. So here, I think that's what the defense original theory was going to be. When Karen was originally arraigned, David Yannetti said on the courthouse steps that my client had no intent. So at that point, they were saying it was an accident. So, and I was able to find something else on the discussion. So I went to ChatGPT to see what they said. And I was interested in the strategic considerations of whether or not, hold on one second, the strategic considerations of whether or not to charge second degree. Because it's not just about whether you think you're going to, here's the thing, it's not just about whether you think you're actually going to win on that charge. So if you're a prosecutor and you're deciding whether you want to, whether it's justified, there's a bunch of other legal considerations, including what kind of evidence would be excluded if you drop that charge. So this is what ChatGPT told me when I asked that specific question about those strategic considerations. Broader scope of evidence. By charging second-degree murder, the prosecution might be able to introduce evidence that demonstrates the defendant's state of mind, history of reckless behavior, or prior OUI offenses. Interesting. So there are no prior OUI offenses, but the judge did allow discussion of the Aruba trip in order to establish the defendant's state of mind. If the state was to drop the second degree, that stuff would be taken off. But also interesting, I don't talk about this much because I don't know. I really would want those ex-boyfriends to either come forward and talk on their own or sign an affidavit. But there is a history of Karen becoming violent with her ex-boyfriends when they break up with her, going all the way back to high school. At least 3 former boyfriends. And I guess Judge Cannoni had determined that it wasn't relevant. And I'm not saying she's right or wrong. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. And obviously it's going to be different in Massachusetts than it is in California. But there is a history there. Not just of reckless behavior, but of angry, violent behavior. Also, so back to the ChatGPT reply, character evidence. In some jurisdictions, a more serious charge like second-degree murder can open the door to character evidence that might otherwise be inadmissible. Witnesses who can testify about the defendant's past behavior, substance abuse issues, or previous dangerous conduct might be allowed to testify to show a pattern of recklessness. So this sounds like, in theory, that stuff could have been on the table, but obviously either Judge Canoni didn't allow it, or the prosecution didn't go after that angle. That's possible too. I don't know. I've never seen the judge have a ruling on this. So I don't know. It may actually be as simple as the prosecution didn't have the resources to go interview her ex-boyfriends. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe Mahoney can tell us. Not the answers, but what the law is on it. What's normally allowed and what isn't allowed. Expert testimony is another thing that would strategic consideration when it comes to second degree. The prosecution might call expert witnesses to testify about the effects of alcohol or drugs on the defendant's behavior, the likelihood of causing harm, and the defendant's awareness of those risks. This can help establish the mental state required for a second-degree murder charge. And there was also victim impact statements, strategic narrative, including a second-degree murder charge, allows the prosecution to present a more compelling narrative of the defendant's actions. Witnesses can speak to the defendant's behavior leading up to the incident, their state of mind, and their disregard for human life. Well, I don't think there's any evidence of that, but so yeah, you can get a lot more in. So if the state decides to drop the second degree charge, this may mean a lot of witnesses that we heard in the first trial we wouldn't get to hear from. So for instance, I'm just hypothetically here. So Kerry Roberts, when Karen called her at 5, said John's dead and screamed her name. And then said that maybe she called back and said maybe he's been hit by a plow. These are strange statements that suggest Karen knew what she did. Is that still admissible if she's not being charged with second degree? I don't know. I mean, maybe it is just as further proof that she did it. I don't know. But so there are a lot of things that would go into a decision about whether or not second degree will be charged. And we may hear about some of this. We won't hear directly about what their thinking is, but we'll get clues to it Friday at the next hearing, because the defense has a couple of motions out there trying to get the first and third charges dropped. So one would be leaving the scene of the accident, and the third one would be the second degree charge. So they want to get it down to that all that's left is the OUI manslaughter. And I do believe that it's unlikely to get a conviction on second degree, but we're talking about whether it makes sense to leave it up there. And another factor that could go into that too would be being fair to the family. If there is evidence for second degree, even if you doubt your ability to make a case beyond a reasonable doubt, do you still have an obligation to present that evidence to a jury? It's the jury that decides what's a fact and what isn't. So is there an obligation to send that? Maybe there is. So I had a few more notes, and then we just go to your questions. And again, thank you everybody for being here. Appreciate it. So for me, second degree is difficult because it's difficult to prove that she knew she hit him, that she did it on purpose. I don't know if we'll ever know any of those questions. The fact that when she got back those first 5 messages that she left John between 12:37 and 1:18, none of them have any indication that she knew what had happened. There's a lot of stuff about I hate you, and there's a lot of stuff about you're cheating on me. And the predominant theme was she was jealous and thought that at that time that he was hooking up with someone else. That wasn't true, of course, but that's what she thought. She was very jealous. But there's no indication that she knew she struck someone. So would there be? Well, if she knew she struck him, but didn't want to admit that in those messages, were those the kind of messages that she would leave? So if you've just struck somebody and you go home and you want to leave and you're going to leave messages for that person, are you really going to leave messages that say I hate you, you fucking pervert, and blah blah blah? I don't think so. But who knows? When someone's really angry and they're drunk, no one can really say for sure. But I think it's really difficult. Those messages tend to somewhat move the balance in the direction of that she didn't know that she had struck him. But when she woke up at 4:38 or sometime before that, called John, he didn't answer the phone. There's a lot of damage on the car. Did she look at it? And then she's she calls her parents a couple of times, talks to her parents, and by around 5:45, the niece testified that Karen woke her up screaming in the house. So she's going nuts. Now, would you be doing that just because John didn't come home and when you went to sleep, you thought that he was cheating on you? Now you're totally having a breakdown. So it does seem to me that something had changed in that time. And then she calls Jen and says that my taillight's broken. So she's aware that the taillight's broken. And then she calls Kerry Roberts and says John's dead. And I think maybe he's been hit by a plow. That's a really strange thing to say. It's a really strange thing to say. So it does seem like she had pieced it together by then. So if that's the case, then why did she go towards the waterfall initially? Again, maybe she was just trying to retrace her steps and she didn't know how to get back to 34 Fairview. We don't know. So, but does any of this add up to beyond a reasonable doubt? It's a tough, it may be close to that, but is it beyond a reasonable doubt? You sure that you want to put someone away for most of the rest of her life on that? I don't know. It's a tough sell. The other part that the state would try to argue is that when they finally did find John, because the fact that Karen could see John in the snow when Jen and Kerry Roberts could not, that was evidence that Karen had already been to the scene and knew he was there. But again, that's so hard to prove. She may have just had better eyesight. She knew where she dropped John off, or she maybe had started to remember it by then, right? Even if she didn't remember before, maybe getting back there. I don't know. It just, again, beyond a reasonable doubt is really difficult. It meant a lot to me. It did impact me when I heard Kerry Roberts testify that even as Karen said, stop, there he is, or something like that, even as she's jumped out of the car and she's running over, Kerry looks and she thinks it's just a snowbank, that it's just a mound of snow, until Karen starts brushing snow off. And then Kerry's like, oh my God, that is John. That meant a lot to me because Kerry wouldn't lie. And even if you believe the conspiracy theory, Kerry had no incentive. Kerry was not friends of the Alberts or the McCabe's or any other thing that you think is part of the conspiracy. She was with the O'Keefes. So, but is that enough beyond a reasonable doubt? I don't know. I think that's going to be a tough sell. All right, so let me just get to the questions. I'll scroll back a little bit, but best to just put the question in now. So we have somewhere about 130 people here on YouTube, and it's hard to know by this Twitter account, but I would say that Twitter shows maybe another couple hundred people. But thank you for being here, guys. And again, if you'd like to join our Discord, just reach out to me. It's kind of reserved for people that have signed up as members, but I recognize the names of anybody that's a regular here. So just reach out if you want to help out with the Discord. So Jimmy says that Karen threatened to leave the kids alone to have John call back and give her proof of life. Maybe. But I also think that she had been talking earlier in the day about going home to her parents because she knew she was figuring out that John didn't really want her around anymore. And she may have been using that as leverage to get him to come home so that she could drive home to her parents. It's hard to say. James says it seems some want a video of her hitting him before they believe it. Yeah, that's true. Unfortunately, people don't want to really take the time to look at. To me, the data is so slam dunk that I'm not going to go into it here because we've talked about it many times, but the correlation of the vehicle data with the phone, John's phone data, is slam dunk. It's bulletproof. It shows what time it happened, but the state didn't make a good case. I pulled the clips together to make sure recently. So yes, Lally did say in the opening that Karen died. I think the accident happened at 12:45. In the closing, he said it happened at 12:30. Now, I guess the jury wasn't supposed to notice that, but we can look at the actual data as I've showed you in a chart, in a timeline chart, that it happened at 12:32 and 9 seconds, plus or minus 5, 6, 7 seconds. That's when it happened. We know to within 15, 20 seconds exactly what time this accident happened, and it was right around 12:32. And so if that was not told to the jury, though, in that way. Now, there are reasons that they probably weren't told, but if you're not telling the jury all of the evidence, hard to win a case that way, in my view. You're hoping they're just going to kind of trust you when you say it was around 12:30, and you're hoping the impact of the I hit him is enough. But in my view, it's better off respect the intelligence of the jury and give them the evidence that they need. Give them the real evidence. Give them all of it. And so one of the reasons that Lally wanted to make it seem more like 12:30 is could her phone connected to John's Wi-Fi at 12:36. We don't know if it was 12:36:00 or 12:36:59. It was somewhere in that 12:36 minute. That means she drove pretty fast going home. But we've had people test this out, and it only takes any of the routes. If you're driving just a little bit faster than the speed limit, and easy to do at 12:30 with no other traffic around, it only takes 4 minutes and a few seconds. So more than likely, when she connected to the Wi-Fi was at 12:36 and 30 seconds or 12:36 and 45 seconds. And there's plenty of time to get home and do it in that time. So to me, trust the jury. They know that. If you look at Google, it's going to say that it takes 5 or it's going to say it takes 6 minutes. So if you go to Google Maps and you calculate how long it takes to get from 34 Fairview to One Meadows, it's going to say 6 minutes. And the defense is going to point that out. But the jurors are human beings. They understand that Google calculation is conservative. It's going to be based on you fully stopping at every stop sign and going no more than the speed limit. But human beings don't usually drive like that. So if you go the route that I think that she went, which was Cedar Crest to Dedham to Washington for briefly, and then a turn onto Pleasant Street, it's minimal turns. So there's minimal reasons to come to a stop. There are no stop signs on the two longest stretches of road. One is Dedham Street and the other is Pleasant Street. There's no stop signs on it. So you can really, you're angry, you're driving mad, there's no traffic, you can crank it up to 50 miles an hour easily. On Cedar Crest, there are a few stop signs, but it's at the middle of the night. There's no traffic around. So you're just going to slow down. You're not going to come to a complete stop. So it really was not difficult for her to make that journey. I believe you can explain that to a jury pretty easily. Maui Swift, I see you wanted to ask me or raise a point, so I'm going to try to get caught up. But hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. Seeing all the regulars. James, Maui, thank you. Appreciate it. Maui says, Kevin, you are trying to use too much logic here. Circumstances like pile up. Well, I believe in logic. That's what I go by, and that's how I've been able to make, in the cases I've done, good decisions, good analysis, good predictions, even just on applying the logic of possibilities. That's, you know, Maui's talking about the newest filing. I'm not sure. If there's been one in the last few days, I wasn't aware of it, so I apologize. If somebody wants to get it to me, we can go over it. Jimmy says the Wi-Fi connects blocks away. Well, also, so Pleasant Street, if you look at the ring video of the driveway, Pleasant Street is actually just beyond the driveway. So you have to come down Pleasant Street, going past the house, and then take a right, and it's the first house. And you so, but that's probably another, that might shave, 10, 15 seconds off it. Goozy thinks he or she or it is pretty smart. Holy shit, 127 watching, but we've already talked about this, Goozy. If I want to get big numbers, I could do a show saying that the Sandy Hook massacre of those first graders was all faked. It was all part of a conspiracy by the government trying to take away your guns. And I would get thousands of views. This is the nature of the beast. If you're going to talk sensible analysis, sober analysis, you're not going to get big views. And we looked on a show earlier in the week back at Young Jelly's channel. He was on the air for 4 or 5 years getting nothing. Even last summer, he was getting just a few hundred views for his shows, for most of his shows. Then all of a sudden, he did Karen Reed, went to Conspiracy Side, and instantly got 7,000 hits. Wow, right? And he's never looked back. He never asks an honest question, never gives you any analysis. He just replays the greatest hits of the conspiracy over and over, and has on really stupid attorneys like Betterow. That's it. So it'd be really easy. I could flip now, right? I could come up with a video tomorrow saying, I've seen the light, and make a really powerful argument. I could make the argument. I could list all the same stupid evidence that they've been talking about for a year. I can make it just as well. I can make it 10 times better than Young Jelly could. And I bet thousands of people would come. They'd come back to me. And that's just the nature of the beast. So if you want to just give people, if you don't want to play the titillating angle, you're not going to get thousands of views. And I'm not going to give people bullshit, especially in something like this where you're victimizing innocent people just to get likes. That's what all the other channels do, almost all of them. There's a few exceptions, obviously. But LT, Turtle, Dylan, Tom CPU, Sean, Young Jelly, am I missing any of these guys? They've never once asked a question. They don't question any aspect of this conspiracy. It's grifting all the way. Melanie Little, it's 100% grifting. There's never even a chance to do anything else. So, Francesca, if you send, I didn't even know there was a latest filing. What's it on? Send it to me, email it to me, or put it in. Francesca, you're in the Discord with us. You can send it there and I'll download it. I didn't even actually realize there was a new one, so we can take a look at it together if you want before we call it a night. What about Nick? Nick does not have his own channel. So I think Nick's a believer. Nick could have launched a YouTube channel and he'd be doing huge right now. He'd be bigger than Jelly. Nick's 100 times smarter than Young Jelly. And unlike Young Jelly, I think Nick probably does have a spine. He just happens to believe in this. But he's not trying to exploit this for himself in any way that we know of. So no, I don't include Nick in that. Hazy, why not just use the facts instead of logic? Well, facts divorced from logic don't really have much meaning. Okay? So, for example, what really turned me in this, as the regulars here know, what made me flip from the conspiracy. Well, first, once I realized the state was challenging 227 last summer, I realized from day one I knew a lot of aspects of this conspiracy theory didn't make sense. Who kills somebody by leaving them alive on their own lawn to die in the cold? That's kind of crazy. Like, who puts a body on their own lawn? If you killed someone in your house, would you put the body on your own lawn? No, nobody does that. Certainly not cops. It never really made a lot of sense. What are the chances that 11 people in the house are going to stay quiet? What are the chances that police are going to plant evidence 16 hours after the event? What are the chances that thank you, just because I appreciate it. What are the chances that all these officials and first responders and police are going to participate in this conspiracy? All these things have extremely long odds against them. So I always had been questioning that, but then you'd look at 227 and you're like, wow, if that happened, damn, there has to be a conspiracy because there's no innocent explanation for it. But then we see the defense was questioning it. So you got an honest person, that the prosecution questioned that. And we now know that they had truly much better experts, Ian Whiffen and Jessica Hyde, than the defense had. And there's a lot of other logical reasons to dismiss 227. But once you dismiss 227, now you really got to dig into other things. And for me, the timeline of the possibility of planting evidence was almost impossible. Once you find out, so the facts are to find out where Karen Reed's vehicle was. And that's what I was focused on a year ago at this time, and maybe more at the end of August, was really focused on finding out where Karen's SUV was during the day. And what time. Well, we knew from early on from the charging document that the main piece was found by the CERT team at 34 Fairview, the main piece of taillight, at 12:45. So where was the car in between there? Who had access to it? Was there any chance that somebody could have had access to it? Now, one of the things that I had believed was that the Canton police would have left a car sitting out there all day, but they didn't. That turned out to be not true. So if you could have got access to the taillight pieces earlier in the day, in theory, it would have been easier to send somebody out there to bury him in the snow, right? Because it was just in the middle of a blizzard and nobody was out there. So in theory, that was possible. But when you looked at where Karen's SUV was all day, it was pretty much impossible to get any access to it until it was in the Sally Port. And so Karen herself leaked to Turtle Boy last summer the photo showing what time the car was towed away. And it was towed away from Dighton at 4:18. That cinched it for me. That cinched the timeline for me because it's a 45-minute trip normally to get from Dighton to Canton. This is during a blizzard at rush hour on one of the busiest highways in America. So while I didn't know the time that it arrived there, we now know it, right? But it could not have been the absolute earliest it could have been, might have been, I calculated last year, might have been 5:10. We now know it got there at 5:31 and was pulled into the garage at 5:36. But before we knew that, until the trial, I was like, all right, maybe if I'm really generous here, that tow truck could have dropped that thing off at 5:10. And it's another 5-minute drive to the crime scene. So who was there at the crime scene? So the earliest I was thinking back then when I made that decision, the earliest they could have got to the crime scene would have been what, 5:20? It's all super unlikely. You're prying taillight pieces from the SUV inside the garage. You got to make sure no one else is around. There's no surveillance cameras on. There's all of this stuff, just all this really unlikely stuff really keeps adding up. But still, you think, all right, maybe somehow you're able to do that. And you take these pieces and you get there at 5:20. Who's there at 5:20? That CERT team didn't just show up like SWAT at 5:40 and start shoveling the snow. No, they would have been there setting up. That's what I just rationally understood that would be the case. And we also knew that WBZ had filmed it. So those news crews take a while to set up. So that truck would have been definitely setting up by 5. So you mean to tell me that Michael Proctor or whoever walked into a crime scene swarming with state police investigators and a WBZ news truck and started planting evidence, that was incredibly unlikely to me. And that was where I concluded that there was almost no chance of a conspiracy. Now, that's logic. That is applying logic to the facts. The facts give you the timeline, and then you apply the logic. Now, the logic does not always include certainty. Sometimes it includes probability. So you can't say for sure that somebody didn't break into John's garage at 3:30 in the morning and tamper with Karen's car and pry off taillight pieces. You can't say for sure that that didn't happen. But what is the probability that it did? There's a ring surveillance video, and that didn't pick up anybody coming in. There's no signs that anybody's broken into John's garage. And not even the defense seems to be everyone have gone with that theory. And then when you dismiss that and just look where Karen's car was, again, it's not mathematically impossible, but it's mathematically super improbable. And then now probabilities multiply together. So if you have, it's really, really improbable that someone could have had access to the SUV in order to get taillight pieces in time to plant them. With all the other improbabilities, those probabilities multiply together. So if there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that somehow somebody snuck into that garage or in the morning got in there unseen and pried taillight pieces and planted it at the scene, being generous, let's call that 1 in 1,000 chance. But then there's a 1 in 100 chance that all 11 people in the house stayed silent. So that 100 now multiplies by 1,000 to get 1 million, right? So that creates 1 million. Did I do that right? No, 100,000. I'm sorry. 100,000. So now you have a 1 in 100,000 chance just that there's a conspiracy. But then there are other probabilities that you can multiply in with that too. So the probability of all of these police planting evidence or being part of this conspiracy, knowing that if they get caught, they're going to lose their jobs and go to jail. What are the odds of that? Is that also 1 in 1,000? So that multiplies against the 100,000. And so now you're starting to get into quantum level numbers. And once you have the point where you get like a 1 in a million chance of a conspiracy, that to me is beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's beyond a reasonable doubt that there's no conspiracy to me. And that's just logic applied to the facts. So again, thank you, Just Because, appreciate it. And thank you, Wicked Umit, appreciate you guys as always. Thank you very much. I am going to see Tom Fleming later in the week at the Cape. So thank you. That's beer money that I will be able to pay the best moderator in the business that is orchestrated the best chat. So I'll be able to take care of his beer. So I appreciate that, guys. Thank you. Smitty Lee says, Kevin, you keep doing your analysis and I'll listen, friend. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And it won't be a huge crowd, unless we find some other way to come up with content that doesn't involve conspiracies that interest people. I don't know what that is. I certainly can't sing or dance. James Hamlet says, it's incredible what people complain about all the time, the different standards in the justice system for wealthy or poor versus minorities on full display. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of stuff that Karen has been able to do with this high-priced defense team. But as we're seeing, Richard Allen has been able to do it too with public defenders. So, Jay Ray is saying, whose evidence is better than Arca's? Well, Arca's doesn't have evidence. They give you analysis of evidence, okay? And I'm not sure if you're aware, if this is your first time here, Jay Ray, so I will tell you. The ARCA guys were brought in. If they were they? So the question is this: if the question is not the expertise of the ARCA guys, the ARCA guys have excellent expertise. No one should question the expertise of this private company called ARCA. This is what they do: accident reconstruction. The question of their credibility comes down to the honesty of what they're doing. Were they after the truth? Were they after the truth? Was Rich Green after the truth about 227? We know he wasn't, because he didn't take the call from Ian Whiffen from Celebrite when he called to try to explain the data. He didn't take it. He wasn't interested. He was not interested in the truth. He was interested just in helping the defense, just helping to create reasonable doubt. That's it. Now, what about the ARCA guys? They were not hired by the defense. They were hired by the feds. Did the feds hire them to find the truth? Or did the feds hire them in order to disprove the state's theory, which, for whatever their reason, whether it's because they had egg on their face because they launched this investigation, maybe there's some other personal reason that they had to connect to Karen, we don't know. Is there a connection to Gennady? We don't know. But we have clues here that are very compelling indicators that the feds were not after the truth, and therefore the ARCA guys were not. And there's a lot of it, but the main thing here is the U.S. attorney did not give the vehicle data to ARCA. Now, asking accident reconstruction people to get to the truth without giving them the vehicle data is like asking a medical examiner to perform an autopsy without giving them the body. That's exactly what it's like. Now, the ARCA guys knew that Toyota has a separate data collection system within their system of codes that is called TechStream. It's very good. It picks up stuff that your regular black box data won't get. And there's an article on ARCA's website published in 2021 where they talk about that very thing. They say we can get evidence on TechStream that others can't recover just by the ordinary EVD information, which is the black box analysis of the data coming in through the sensors. Now, let's say Josh Levy didn't know about the TechStream data. Maybe he didn't know that there was that vehicle data. I don't know why he wouldn't know. I mean, it seems obvious that he would know. But the ARCA guys would definitely know that there would be TechStream data. And they didn't ask for it. They didn't say, Mr. Levy, did you get any vehicle data? Did you get this TechStream data? Nope. They didn't say that. So that tells you right there all you need to know. They weren't after the truth. The state was trying. The ARCA guys got a clear message from the state. I'm sorry, from the feds. The ARCA guys got a clear message from the feds that we're trying to disprove the state's theory. That's their goal. You're not gonna find a smoking gun for that. You're not gonna find a written contract with ARCA saying, we want you to disprove the state's theory. No, that's not how it works. But they understood that the only reason they were hired was because the feds were questioning the state's theory that a vehicle hit John. And so if there ever is a contract that we can find, it'll probably say you are tasked with finding out if it was possible for a vehicle to hit John O'Keefe. But from that, the ARCA guys knew what the feds wanted them to find because they were not given the TechStream data and they didn't ask for it. So no, the feds are not credible and the ARCA guys were not credible. That's the problem, is with the credibility. Yeah, all the turtle nuts claims that Kate is afraid. I'm sorry, that Aiden is afraid of Kate. This is how you know it's a cult. These people will believe anything. Anything. There's almost nothing they won't believe. And it's, if maybe this is probably dating myself a little bit here, but it's like Lucy with the football in the Charlie Brown strip. It was a repeat gag. Every time she'd hold the football for him to kick at the last second he's about to hit it, she'd pull the ball out and he'd go spin it off and land on his head. And he fell for it every time. He never learned. This is how it is with turtle people. This is how it is with Sean's followers in particular. How many times does Sean get to say that the feds are coming? They're not coming. They're not coming. How many times do you get to predict the end of the world happens on January 12th, and then January 12th comes and it doesn't happen? No, I'm sorry. I meant March 1st. No, I'm sorry. No, I meant, at some point, normal people would learn and say, maybe this guy is lying to me. But they don't learn. These guys have zero capacity to learn. It's unbelievable how little capacity to learn the turtle riders have. I mean, it's almost entertaining to watch, except it's hurting real people. But it is entertaining. A live from the fire pit. It sounds like fun. I don't know if the lighting will be too good, but yep, Jimmy's saying they didn't ask for the Lexus. It's the tech stream. Yep. Oh, okay, Jay Ray. Yep. I was responding to somebody. Yeah, that's the danger of chat is like if I'm trying to answer questions, but I don't know, you could be talking to someone else. And yes, there are people here much more interesting than me, so I don't blame you. The feds are conspiring. Well, I don't who they're conspiring with. Karen Reed's team. Yeah, that's a given. I mean, look, there's a lot of evidence of it. All right. So August 2022, long before Rich Green found any weird data. Long before. Sorry, had to boot somebody. Long before that weird stuff about the data was found. And really, there's really no other evidence for a conspiracy that's compelling beyond 227, right? Or the idea of John going up and down stairs. That didn't come out until months after Karen Reed's team managed to get the feds involved. And they went into, instead of getting the FBI involved, they went into, he's now U.S. Attorney Josh Levy. But at the time, he was first U.S. Attorney. He was next underneath U.S. Attorney Rachel Rollins, still incredibly high up in the government. That's not how these investigations normally work. Normally, you get the FBI to look at something, and if they find evidence, then it goes higher up, and eventually you get a federal grand jury, and that's how it works. But this was top down. Instead, they somehow got a meeting with Josh Levy. How does it, you can ask other defense attorneys, how do they get a meeting with the first U.S. attorney? That just doesn't normally happen, but it happened here, despite having no compelling evidence. So they somehow got a meeting with Josh Levy, and I've seen the messages from Karen Reed to Natalie bragging about how powerful Josh Levy was. In her messages, she would show the chain of command, showing how high up the employee chart was in the government that Josh Levy was. Very high up, very elite guy, very powerful guy. And she was bragging about how they managed to get him to directly, this is what she was saying in her letters, in her messages. It's not just that they went in and they got Josh Levy to say, this is interesting, I'm going to pass this along to the FBI. No, I read the messages, okay? And in these messages, it said, she's saying he's going to handle this himself. First U.S. attorney, Josh Levy, is going to handle the investigation into the investigation itself. She was celebrating this with these messages. That's all the way back in August of 2022. This is unprecedented. This is corrupt. That doesn't happen. Okay? Now, by May of 2023, so Turtle Boy's first story was April 18th, 2023. And she was pushing Turtle Boy to go on about the feds. And Turtle Boy was reluctant. Turtle Boy's smarter than Sean. He doesn't like to get snookered. And a lot of people have been trying to snookered him over the years. He did ultimately get snookered here. And now he doesn't have the integrity to go back. But he was reluctant at the time to go that Fed angle because he didn't have any proof. And Karen was getting mad at him because he wouldn't go with it. So what was Karen giving him? Karen was giving him information about when witnesses were testifying before the federal grand jury. Now we don't know for sure how Karen had that information, but it looks like it was coming from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Now it could have come from an FBI agent that was assigned that was for some reason and now was on their side, which is not how. That's again another sign that's completely inappropriate. But it seems to have been coming. There was a direct connection between Karen and the U.S. Attorney. By then he was now by May of 2023, he now was the acting U.S. Attorney. And the only people over him in the government is the Attorney General in Washington. God, I can't remember his name at the moment. And the president. That's it. Very high up. And Josh Levy, not only, and he proved to be true to his word that he was going to handle this himself, because he himself interrogated most of the witnesses in this grand jury. It takes many hours to prepare, many days to prepare to grill a witness. And this guy's got all kinds of important cases going on. This is a very powerful, and the U.S. attorney does not question people, even like a mafia case. The U.S. attorney does not question witnesses. That just doesn't happen. But here it did. And then despite all this crazy mob that was stirred up, and we know Josh Levy is media savvy. He loves a press conference. So he certainly knew this frenzy that had been stirred up all last summer, they weren't pink at the shirt at that time, but all the people protesting at the courthouse. He knew, but yet in November of this past year, so November of 2023, he has a teleconference call with Karen Reed's attorneys, David Yannetti and Alan Jackson. And in that, he advises that they find a way to delay the trial. So he was still at that late stage coordinating directly with Karen Reed's attorneys. That's corrupt. There's no other explanation for this. That is corrupt. Now, we don't know the basis for that corruption. Is it personal? Is it some personal connection there? We don't know. We don't know. But that is the true corruption in this whole thing. So Jay Ray says, I think the feds hired them because they wanted to know whether or not John and the SUV were involved in a vehicle pedestrian collision. If it made sense, the biomechanics and the damage. But Jay, why didn't they give them the vehicle data? You have to explain that, dude. There's no innocent explanation for that. Why didn't the ARCA guys ask for that tech stream data? I mean, these guys are out there designing T-shirt shooting machines in order to fire a cocktail glass at the taillight. You don't think they wanted the vehicle? If they wanted the truth, you don't think they'd want the vehicle data? They're trying to calculate the size of the glass and where it might have struck the taillight to see if that's possible. Don't you want to know the speed of the vehicle that's coming towards that glass in order to make that calculation? The only way to know that speed is from the vehicle data. And they didn't want it. They had no interest in it. Again, it's like doing an autopsy without getting the body. It doesn't make sense. So did the feds technically hire them to do that? Yes, but they clearly dog whistled it. And these ARCA guys, look, even just look at the way Dr. Wolf testified on the stand. He was hostile to the prosecution. He acted like a defense witness. He didn't act like somebody objective or neutral. He acted like someone trying to help the defense team. So even when Adam Lally, for instance, asked, he asked the question, is it normal for a pedestrian to lose a shoe in a collision with a vehicle? The answer is yes. But that Dr. Wolf dug in his heels and refused to say it. Now, if he was there, honestly, he just would have said, yes, of course it is. It's a yes or no question. And it's an easy yes question. But he wouldn't give it. This is because he was trying to dig in his heels. He was trying to help the defense. Meanwhile, we now know his wife was participating in the Karen Reed forum. So this is not on the up and up. It's just not. And meanwhile, you can look at the vehicle data and the way it correlates with John's phone. It's bulletproof. It shows that Karen's vehicle struck John at 12:32. There's no other explanation. So the ARCA guys are wrong, and you can look at it from that angle too. Are they wrong because they were incompetent, or are they wrong because they weren't after the truth? Well, it's clearly the latter. They weren't interested in the truth. Yes, we do need a reconstruction video of what happened, of what the state's theory is. And more visual aids, yep. And we've already put together one with the help. I put together the timeline and I played my cruder version of it. But then somebody, maybe I'll pull it up for you if it's still convenient. I don't remember if I have it on this computer. I might not. Just pull it up, but I don't remember if I have this on this computer. But one of our regulars, I do have it. Okay. One of our regulars really did a good job helping us pull this together. So I will show it to you. I think most of us have seen this by now. Most of the regulars. So this was put together with someone who's very good with the graphics. I got the timeline. The timeline is all taken from the documents. Now, this is something that I think would be extremely powerful to present to a jury. So Adam Lally is welcome to use it. And I think there's all kinds of other similar things that he could put together that would be helpful. Why would the feds not want the truth? That is the question that has to be answered. This is the thing, Hazy in life. We know that they didn't want the truth because of the way they've acted. We don't know the reason why. We don't know what the connection was. It could be as simple as this. Yannetti had a connection with the U.S. Attorney's Office with Rachel Rollins. He had once been, I think, her transition manager into the U.S. I don't know. He knows her very well, and they both worked as prosecutors for Boston. And so that might have been enough to get a meeting, to get the foot in the door with her then first U.S. Attorney, Josh Levy. And then maybe they managed to dupe. I don't know. There was almost no evidence at that point, but maybe they managed to somehow dupe Josh Levy. Look, if the history of looking at all these cases, Jared, I just went over with the Delphi murders, all of this is littered with people getting duped. Lawyers, police, prosecutors, FBI. It almost seems to be the norm. People don't weigh evidence well. The people that I've dealt with on this case that weigh the evidence really well are almost all women, and none of them are lawyers or in law enforcement. So it doesn't give me the best impression of the evidence weighing ability of lawyers or of law enforcement. Most of the ones that I've dealt with, some of them have done very good, but most of the ones that I've dealt with leaves a lot of shortcoming. And so it's very possible that Josh Levy, who graduated, I think, top in his class or second in his class at Princeton, he got duped. Maybe more than that. There may be some corruption there that we don't know. But I think he got duped, and then he dug in his heels because he didn't want it to be clear that he got duped. But there's no question there's something corrupt going on. There's no way that Josh Levy should be meeting with the defense lawyers of Karen Reed in November, months before the trial was supposed to begin. There is no way. It's completely inappropriate for Josh Levy to be the U.S. attorney, to be telling these lawyers in a state murder case to get a delay of the trial and telling them to not go to the media with it. There's no way. So I don't know Michael Proctor. I'm looking at Ann's comment. And anybody that I don't know is capable of being corrupt, right? Even some people I do know, But I can't tell you whether Michael Proctor is capable of police corruption. There's no evidence that he's done it before. But what I can tell you is there was no time for Michael Proctor to get to those pieces and then plant them. So even if, hypothetically, Michael Proctor wanted to help out the Alberts, there was no way. There was no opportunity. That is the problem. So even if we accept that maybe Michael Proctor is a bad guy and he doesn't like Karen Reed, we know that, right? There's just no opportunity for him to have. There's no evidence, and there was no opportunity. There's no evidence he planted anything, and there was no opportunity to do it. And it would have been, and most of the stuff that gets put out there has now been completely debunked, right? The idea that Proctor had John's clothing inside his SUV for 6 weeks. No, it went right to the evidence room. Okay, so the idea that there's a missing belt, missing shoe, missing socks, missing hat, all that stuff we now know is not true. So at some point, the people that are here that believe in Free Karen Reed, isn't there a point where you start looking at the things that you're told and start questioning it and start having a healthier sense of skepticism? What is the point that happens? I'm just curious. I mean, at what point, how many times do you need to be presented with things that turn out to be false before you say, maybe I better start rethinking this a little bit? I understand there's probably those key points that are lodged in your mind that you think are the most important, but you have to have that self-awareness to say that, okay, a year ago, were those the things you focused on, or were you focused on something else? Because this is what happens in Free Karen Reed people too. The thing that they thought that was the most important in July of 2023, that was the reason that they thought there was a conspiracy. They no longer believe that. Now so by October of 2023, they had now dismissed that, but there was some other thing that made them think that there was a conspiracy theory, that there was a conspiracy. And then by December or January, that thing was now gone too, and they had moved on to some new thing. And they don't have the self-awareness to realize they're continuously moving away from evidence that's debunked, but then just moving on to something new. And what that should be is a clue to them that they just really want to believe in the conspiracy, because you're making these transitions without even skipping a beat. And so I think you need to have more self-awareness. All right, so I'm going to skip all the way to the end, take a comment, and then call it a night. So skipping to the end. How did it go right to the evidence room? It went right to the evidence room. The evidence bag was dated 3/14. No, what you're talking about is every time they go into the evidence bag, they have to redate it. But it's not. You have it wrong. It's not the evidence bag. It was logged into the state police lab at 3/14, because we now understand how this works. All right, I'm really glad you asked this question. Thank you. I'm glad, because I think it's important to. From questions comes understanding. GP Dog Drool says, how did it go right to the evidence room if the evidence bag was dated 3/14/22? No, that's not what happened. The criminologist testified that it showed up in the log in the system for the state police at 3/14. Does that mean it was in Michael Proctor's car all that time? No, because what happens is the state police have a homicide unit at the Norfolk County DA. That's how it works. There's a homicide unit, an evidence unit, and the whole, I'm not sure, state police team that is assigned to each district attorney's office. And so they technically work under the DA. So Tully was the head of it. Brian Tully was the head of that unit, and all the other investigators for the state police that work under him. But he's not working out of a state police barracks. He's working out of a building owned by the Norfolk County DA, the Norfolk County DA's office. And in there, they have an evidence room. And in that evidence room is where John's clothing was kept. So the clothing was put on a table right outside the evidence room to dry off. And it was there for, I forget what it was, over the weekend or a couple of days. And from there, it was bagged and put into the evidence room. What you're talking about here is not that it was bagged at 3:14. That's when they finally had collected all the evidence, and it moves off to the state police lab for the analysis by the criminologists, the experts. These are the lab people. They're going to look at the taillight pieces. They're going to look at the clothing. So there's a process that's going here, but it was always in control. There was never any question with that. So, but thank you. I'm glad you asked. Evidence bag equals Stop and Shop bag. That was not the state police. That was the Canton police. And so you can criticize them for that, but it turns out that the way evidence bags are is actually just a paper bag anyways. Not a Stop and Shop bag normally, but usually it's a market basket one. No, I'm kidding. But it is a paper bag just like that anyway. So it wasn't like there was some crazy thing they did. Jimmy, you're welcome. Thank you for being here. It went to the evidence room on that day. He's putting here 3:14. I don't have the trial in front of me. It was around that time. I don't remember exactly what the date was, but I discussed it on the channel back then. That's when it went, and it was nobody discussing this. None of the lawyers, even the grifting lawyers, discussing this. Maybe Bettero, that guy's an idiot, but none of the more serious lawyers think that there was anything funny with the evidence. None of them. We didn't understand how the process worked. Now we got a much better sense of it from listening to the testimony of the criminologists, and mostly from Troopers Tully and Buchanan and Proctor. But there's no evidence. Everything was normal. It went to an area to dry off that day, and then a few days later, it was deemed dry enough. It was always in. They have act just because it's in the evidence room. If it's outside the evidence room, it's not like it's in the hallway. It's where the rest of the homicide unit is. So it's normal for them to take evidence even to their desk to analyze it. So it's not like it's not like they can't have access to the evidence. So the state needs to hire Kevin as a special investigator. No, I mean, I just watched the trial and it's just common sense. But I mean, thank you for the comment. But I just watched the trial and put it together. I don't know how this stuff works either. I didn't know how the evidence room worked. I didn't know that the state police troopers would be assigned to a unit that is that's their full-time job. They report to work at the district attorney's office. They don't report to work in a barracks. They're assigned to that unit. That's where they are. All right, so we're going to get rid of this Mo dude here because he's clearly insane, but there is no shortage of video footage that shows the condition of that taillight. It was shattered in pieces, but not only that, don't believe me, believe Karen Reed, okay? Because if we ever show this, I can tell you it was in Discovery and they decided not to go with it for some reason, but Karen told Gretchen Voss of Boston Magazine that when she examined the taillight in the driveway, it was shattered in pieces. She described it very much what we saw, and in fact that she even pulled a piece out and dropped it in John's driveway. Okay, why did she tell that story? Because they didn't even understand. You're saying that it's important to show that the taillight was not shattered in pieces, that it was just cracked. But you know who understood that importance and before the defense? And you know who the defense got that from? Me. Yes, I know that's absurd, but it's the truth. If you go back, and I've showed this before on Court TV, when they released the Ring video, when Karen's defense team released it to a Court TV reporter and explained to that Court TV reporter the significance, They told that court TV reporter that when you looked at that video, it showed Karen's SUV in the driveway, shattered and in pieces. It does not say that it was just cracked. I've played the video. You can go back and look for yourself. Go onto YouTube and go to a year ago when that thing was first released, when the defense first released it. Go read how the reporter, what she says. Thank you, Pat. What she says that the defense team told her. They told her that it was clearly missing pieces here. They didn't understand it. And that's why when Karen said this to Gretchen Voss, David Yannetti was in the room and he allowed it to be said. Because he didn't know, because he didn't understand the significance of it. But then about a week after that, yes, and Pat, I promise you the beer money will go to Thomas Fleming. And it will get used. About a week after that, Court TV released that. I said to Sean McDonough on the phone, because I thought I knew he was on the conspiracy side, or believed in the conspiracy, but I thought he was after the truth. I had no idea that Sean was in direct communication with Karen Reed or her defense team. I said to Sean on the phone, I said, what we need is a clear image that shows the condition of that taillight earlier in the day. I said, if it shows that it's cracked, there's a conspiracy. If it shows that it's missing pieces, there's not. And nobody understood that. I know I'm patting myself on the back, but it's just, I can prove it to you in the messages. When I said that to Sean, that's when the light went off in his head. And he went back to Karen and Alan Jackson and said, we need to get a picture that shows the condition of the taillight. And what did he do? Sean started sending me pictures. I still have them on my phone from Discovery of the condition of the taillight in the Sally port. And he said, here's the pictures. He goes, which it didn't help me because it didn't show the pictures from earlier in the day. But for some reason, he thought it might help me. So he sent it to me. He goes, but you can't show them on your show to your audience. Because, well, this is how I knew he either was talking to someone. He was either talking to Karen Reed or he was talking to someone who was getting their information from Karen Reed. And we now know he was talking to Karen Reed. But at that point, they didn't know. So if 1 year ago today, you would have talked to Karen Reed's defense team, they would not say that Karen's team, that taillight was cracked. I know that's what Alan Jackson said in his closing arguments, but he didn't know it a year ago. A year ago, they said it was missing pieces. Go back and don't take my word for this. You can go right now onto YouTube and look up the original Ring video released and see how the court reporter described the court TV reporter describes it. Okay, so they didn't know. So this theory that you're married to now, that taillight was only cracked, you and your people didn't figure this out a year ago. You didn't know it. You got me to thank. You're welcome. That's just the reality of it. I can show you the messages, but you can go back and look at that. I'm sorry, it is what it is. And the video that Hillbilly Nitro helped zoom in for us shows clearly at 5:08 that it's missing pieces in a way that very closely matches up to what we saw later in the Sally port. In addition, Kerry Roberts testified that it was missing pieces exactly as to what she was shown in the Sally port, and the defense didn't question her. So they accepted it. In addition, at 8:22, the dash cam video from the cop that did the wellness check, if you look closely, you can see that it's missing pieces. In addition, finally, when that SUV is on the tow truck and they test it so the brake light goes off and on, you can see that it comes out white, which tells you that the red glass is missing. So there is a lot of evidence, video evidence, that shows that taillight was missing pieces all throughout the day, the entire day. So it is what it is. You may reject that evidence. What can I tell you? You can reject the evidence that we landed on the moon too, but we did. I can't. It's a free country. You can believe what you want. So. That's not what the Dighton officer said. He said it was not completely broken, but that the right side of it was missing pieces. You can go back and play it again. Don't just listen to what these people tell you. Do your own work. Watch the trial. Go back and rewatch it. That's not what the Dighton officer said. Now, that thing was covered in snow, but he still described it as missing pieces. So stop believing people that want to lie to you. Don't be gullible. If you walk onto a used car lot and the salesman tells you this car is the greatest car ever and it's never been in an accident and it runs like a charm, have a little bit of skepticism, because that guy's job is to sell you a car. I don't understand you Karen Reed people have no sense of skepticism at all. It's really strange to me. You're very gullible. Very, very gullible people. It's like gullible can be dangerous in life, you know? Gullible is a dangerous thing when you just believe things without asking any questions, without trying to piece things together. You just believe something because somebody says it on YouTube. Don't believe it because I say it. Go and research it. Look it up. Don't believe it because Sean says it or Turtle says it. Do your own homework. I go by what's in the documents and what was in the trial. Now, with a few exceptions, I give you the story about Gretchen Voss, but because I know Gretchen Voss and I know she's trustworthy. Hi, Nunya. I know you're a good gentleman. Whether you're gullible or not, I don't know. I don't know you well enough to know. But just don't believe things just because somebody says it on YouTube. I mean, you don't understand what's going on. How many times do people get to lie to you before it dawns on you to ask a question and to doubt it? All right, guys, this has been a very long show, but I appreciate it. I didn't mean to get excited with you. Nunya, it's good to see you. Cheers. I wish you well. Jay, whatever your name is, everybody. So if you want the truth, I respect that. Even if you have a different opinion than me, as long as you are after the truth. That's all that really matters to me. And you're trying to apply some skepticism to what you're told, and you're trying to ask questions. See, if you're Turtle Boy, you're not asking questions. If you're all the other channels, Sean, LTL, Young Jelly, you're not asking questions. That's the problem. Melanie Little has never asked a question on any of this stuff. If you want to ask questions, you'll get to the truth. And as long as we sense that you're trying to ask some both sides kind of questions, that's how you may think I'm on one side. I'm not. I weighed these questions for months, and I'm still weighing questions about second degree and stuff like that, and trying to get to what route she took. Did she possibly know? What did she know? When did she know it? I'm not sure. I'm still asking questions. But you're narrowing things down by going to the evidence. So Hayden Kane says, I must say I did enjoy some of your coverage earlier on the Delphi stuff, but I must say you need to be much less smug on your opinions. Less smug? Or do you want me to be less smug? I don't know. I'm confused. Do you want me to more smug or less smug? All right, I guess less smug. Well, I apologize for that, Hayden Kane. But if I give people analysis and it consistently turns out to be accurate and useful, which it has, I'm going to point that out once in a while, just so people will take other analysis more seriously. So some people might not like that my analysis turned, for instance, that in Delphi, that what caused the police to understand to catch on to Richard Allen was not a tip. My analysis was no, they went back to square one when the river search turned up empty. That was my prediction and my analysis, not based on any evidence, just based on the best logic that I could apply to it. we now know, based on this week, that I was correct. Is it smug for me to point that out? I don't know, maybe. Or is it just in the interest of, hey, my analysis can be pretty good because I'm just using logic. I'm not trying to woo. I'm not giving you psychic impressions. So I'm just giving you logic. And that's it. So Joan, I appreciate that. So Joan balances off Hayden, who I appreciate Hayden. So I do appreciate your advice. Joan says, Kevin, you're not smug. I totally appreciate your logic and your concentration on evidence and common sense. Yes, that's all I'm trying to do. And I make no claim to expertise. Nope. I'm an old bar owner, old bartender. That's it. I'm a writer. If there's any area that I claim a little bit of knowledge is, it's just in narrative, how to construct a narrative. But in terms of evidence, no, I have no useful expertise or training. Nothing. I'm applying logic to the evidence, and seems to be pretty effective, but it's not going to be perfect, and not everybody's going to agree. All right, guys, have a good night. And again, Friday, 2:00. Consider joining the people standing up for justice, the people standing up to bullies. The guys that have been out there, led initially by Kate, and Kate's still a leader, but a whole bunch of other people that I won't name that are out there fighting against an angry horde, fighting for reason, fighting for logic, fighting for justice, fighting for truth, fighting against the witch hunt. They could use your help out there Friday. If you're the kind of person that finds it appealing to stand with a small group against a larger group of bullies, it takes courage to do that. And so a lot of these people have to wear sunglasses and hats because they don't want to be identified, because they know what this mob will do to them. They don't want to be out there. They don't enjoy being out there. They're doing it because they feel it's the right thing to do. So if you are the kind of person that is inspired by that and wants to be a part of it, reach out to me, go to justiceforjohnokeefe.com, find out more information, and we'll be out there. It's going to be a nice day, and we'll stand there and we'll support the family, and the family of John O'Keefe really did appreciate the support. You could see that. And I think you'll feel good that you stood up to a large mob. It takes guts to do that. And so if you have guts and you're willing to do that, we appreciate it. Have a good night, guys.